Three of us, fish chips, peas, I think one of us carry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Give me a ring.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory, 3 minutes past 6. This is, of course, the home of common sense, and I am Mike Graham, and we are here for the duration, for a glorious hours of Morning Glory between now and 10 o'clock. And we've got plenty to talk about, by the way. Theo Usher was here. He's going to help us look through the papers and see what's going on. An awful lot of them leading, of course, with the big story of Liberation Day. That's what Trump's calling it. We are not necessarily calling it that, but the front page of the Times says firms told to brace for impact of Trump tariffs. Starmer's 11th hour bid to halt trade war on the Telegraph. The Daily Mail, Trump's tariffs threaten crisis for Reeves. It's very bad news for Rachel Reeves. It's very bad news probably for Keir Starmer as well. We'll attempt to make sense of it, because my sense of all of this is that most of you don't really know or care about what the tariffs are going to be. You're not going to be sitting up late at night going, oh, well, there goes my Gucci handbag. I'm not going to be able to buy one of those now because it could cost about another £5,000. Oh, blimey, I can't buy myself a Cadillac Escalade because imagine how much that's going to cost now. And the Tesla, crikey, I can't get my head around how much that's going to cost me now, now that it's coming over. So, you know, there's an awful lot of nonsense being talked. It's a very big media story, this, but it does have an effect on the government. It will mean that Keir Starmer, if he doesn't carve out a deal, will be in even further trouble than he is already. Rachel Reeves has already crashed the economy, so I'm not quite sure how much further down it can plunge, but we will keep you abreast of all of it. There's a lot of other really, really good stories going on as well. But let's get Donald Trump's explanation, because here's what he said last month about the tariffs.
Tariffs are about making America rich again and making America great again, and it's happening, and it will happen rather quickly. There'll be a little disturbance, but we're okay with that. It won't be much.
A little disturbance, and we're okay with that. And it's all about America at the end of the day, so we'll bring you a lot of other stories that are going on, including, of course, the fact that Ryanair are now suing the air traffic controllers in this country because of what happened. You might remember last year when everything went doolally because the guy who was supposed to be in charge of air traffic control engineering was working from home. That's going on. The French have admitted they must do more to stop migrants coming to Britain. Well, hello, bonjour, you know, wake up and smell the coffee, or the café au lait. You should have been doing that for weeks and weeks and months, shouldn't you? Also, it turns out that every single Albanian criminal that we deport costs something like £537,000. Also, another triumph from Rachel Reeves, the new welfare reforms apparently mean that there's an extra 400,000 people who are now going to be signed off from work with sickness, so that's another triumph. And Ed Miliband has been warned not to squeeze the UK economy by one of Britain's top businessmen. There's an awful lot going on. Of course, Prince Harry still very much front and centre of the news as well. It's all over the front page of The Sun that the charity boss who claims that she was bullied by Harry is now saying that she's had to come off social media because of all the trolls that have threatened her who support Meghan. Absolutely incredible stuff. It's 5 minutes past 6. This is Morning Glory. Let us get it on. And a very good morning and welcome to Wednesday, the 2nd of April. And Theo Usherwood is here. Theo, very good morning to you. Nice to see you. We were just discussing the fact that the tariff story is obviously front and centre. Yeah. Everybody's talking about it. It's all over the BBC. You know, they're all sort of telling us how terrible Trump is and he's going to ruin the world's economy. Yeah. He seems quite relaxed about it. Yeah. The truth of the matter is that most people will not be affected by directly what happens on Liberation Day in terms of what tariffs get put on what goods, right? However, it will probably be detrimental in the end to the economy. Prices will go up, and it'll be very bad news for Rachel Reeves.
Yes, in short, nothing's going to change tomorrow morning. Right. We're not going to feel it. There's two dangers, of course, and that is that tariffs mean that we're not, unable to export to the US effectively. Right. Pharmaceuticals industry in this country, has a strong export market, particularly to the United States. Yeah. And of course, those will be jobs in the pharmaceuticals industry that could potentially go. And as a result, bad news for Rachel Reeves. The other danger is that, of course, many goods in China and in the Far East and India as well that were destined to go to the United States now can't get into the United States because of the tariffs. Yeah. And so they wash up here instead and, of course, undercut the prices for many products that are produced in this country. Right. So they're going to have a knock-on impact like that. But you're quite right to say nothing is going to change tomorrow, so we don't need to have a little panic. Right. It's OK. Yeah. Sit down, have a cup of tea. It. I
mean, if Jaguar Land Rover, for example, have to put something like a 25% surcharge on the cars that they sell in America, that will probably make them pay, the Americans pay about what we pay. Yeah. Because I always remember back in the day when I was living over there, you could buy a Jaguar in America for a lot less money than you could buy one here. Yeah. So in a way, what goes around comes around. International trade is a very complicated and many-fingered beast, isn't it?
Yeah, and of course, Donald Trump has a strategy. What he's sick and tired of I'm British. I want Britain to do well. But what Trump has seen, and we've seen this right across the Western economies, what he's sick and tired of happening is that America has favourable deals compared to Europe already has tariffs on US products. Yes. If US wants to sell,
and that's just Trump's point, isn't it? If lots of other countries are putting tariffs, Canada as well. When Canada started jumping up and down about it, he was like, well, hang on a minute, you've been putting tariffs on American goods for years.
And that means that American companies can't produce the products to sell abroad, and that hollows out American industry. Right. And what he's trying to do is to say to we call them working class, middle class in America. Yeah. That he's trying to say, actually, you know what? I'm on your side. I'm going to get these industries back up and running, producing goods, manufacturing goods that could sell around the world. And it's interesting, we're prevaricating over this digital services tax. Right. Israel, by the way, has just said, their finance minister has just come out and said, look, we're just going to remove tariffs on US products because we want to be exempt from this deal. And now we learn that Keir Starmer is trying to do something around the digital services tax to try and help US tech firms, but it might be too little too late. Right. And if he doesn't get this right, and we see, the OBR said yesterday, this is the Office for Budget Responsibility, that headroom that, of course, meant that Rachel Reeves had to go and cut welfare spending to get it back, that could be wiped out again. She'll just come back this time, though, she's going to come back with tax rises. Yeah. And so, whilst it may not affect your listeners tomorrow or the next day, if Rachel Reeves comes back in the autumn because she's lost her fiscal headroom and she needs to make it that £9 billion quid.
But she's already lost her fiscal headroom.
Yeah, she lost it once, and she'll have to lose it again, or she'll have to break her rules. And she's not going to break her rules because over there in the City of London they'll have a complete panic, and then they'll we could see.
I mean, I love the fact that the City of London and all the other sort of people that run stock exchanges around the world are all panicking now and saying, isn't it terrible what Donald Trump's doing? He's creating all this uncertainty. That's what they make money on. Yeah, of course. That's what they do. They spend their entire lives betting on whether the markets are going to go up or down, and they make an awful lot of money getting it right and lose an awful lot of money getting it wrong. So I've got no sympathy for anybody in the city. Thank you very much.
They make money out of volatility. Yeah. If it's a stable market, nobody's making much money. If everything's going up and down and it's like a yo-yo, that's where you could do the trades and make the deals.
Exactly. So, I mean, all of this, there's an awful lot of virtue signalling going on, an awful lot of posturing, an awful lot of people sort of trying to make out, as usual, Donald Trump bad, everybody else good. And it really doesn't work like that. Yeah. But let's get put Caroline Leavitt, who is the wonderful press secretary in the United States, in the White House. Let's get her explanation of why the US is doing this.
Looking ahead to tomorrow, April 2nd, 2025, will go down as one of the most important days in modern American history. Our country has been one of the most open economies in the world, and we have the consumer base hands down, the best consumer base. But too many foreign countries have their markets closed to our exports. This is fundamentally unfair. The lack of reciprocity contributes to our large and persistent annual trade deficit that's gutted our industries and hollowed out key workforces. But those days of America, beginning tomorrow, being ripped off are over. American workers and businesses will be put first under President Trump, just as he promised on the campaign trail. The president's historic action tomorrow will improve American competitiveness in every area of industry, reduce our massive trade deficits, and ultimately protect our economic and national security. President Trump's economic vision is rooted in common sense.
I mean, what more can you say? This is the home of common sense. They're using it in America. Everything they're doing is built around the sort of the concept of common sense. And basically, you know, Caroline Leavitt, they're talking about how lots of other countries have been putting tariffs on America for a long time, including the British, by the way. And we put tariffs on all of their food products that come out of the US. Apparently, we tariff chicken, beef, and other meats that come out. And we heard, I mean, it was only last week I had to upbraid somebody for mentioning the dreaded chlorinated chicken. Do you remember that argument that used to go on during Brexit? Oh, we're going to be eating chlorinated chicken, it's going to be terrible. Of course, it never happened after Brexit, and it hasn't happened since, and it never will happen, you know, because it's nothing to do really with our importing of bad, useless, horrible food. It's all to do with international trade, and international trade has to go both ways, surely.
Yes, it does, and you heard it there. You know, I think there's always a danger in this country and in Europe that we have a panic and we think it's all about us. It's not. No, it's about the American consumer.
Trump couldn't care less about Britain.
It's about the American consumer. It's about his domestic audience. And since, you know, he took office on January the 20th, I should say, every single day his announcements have been about the American people. Even when he's framed it around, let's say, Ukraine, it's about, hang on a moment, we're paying for your arms. We want our money back. Or we want to be properly remunerated for the arms that we're giving you. So we look at it.
Put any tariffs on those?
We look at it. We look at it, Mike, as in we're saying, well, hang on. You know, does he support Europe? Does he not support Europe? Is he going to be there as a backstop for NATO? Is he not going to be there as a backstop for NATO? But what's ticking over in Trump's head aren't necessarily those complicated questions. The simple question is, for Donald Trump and for his White House, is what's the deal for the American people? Because those are the people who elected me into this office, and those are the people I'm here to serve.
And those are the people whose sort of economic lifestyle is at risk. So he's going to protect them before he protects anybody else. And why wouldn't he?
But you've been over to the United States in recent years. When I was over there covering the first election, and you would go to places. I went to places like Pennsylvania. I went to New Jersey. And when you're there, you know, outside of New York, or I was on the East Coast, so outside of New York or outside of LA, people are suffering. It's not a great economic picture. In New York, it's you've got all the fancy, got all the glitz, you've got all the showbiz, the nice hotels and everything. But you go to, you don't have to go 50 miles down the road, and you could see not even that, and you could see that people, their lifestyles are suffering. People are up at 4 o'clock in the morning. They're living in towns. I remember being in just outside of Scranton and just seeing these huge shopping centres just empty. People just don't have the money to spend. And Middle America suffering, and that's what he wants to get back. He wants to get those communities thriving again.
Absolutely right. Because the other thing that happened yesterday, of course, is Donald Trump has signed off Britain's handover of the Chagos Islands, triggering fury over a deal which is set to cost us billions. Now, again, this is another story that everybody thought wouldn't happen. You know, everyone said, well, surely Donald Trump is going to go along with the Nigel Farage line, which is basically this is a sell-off of part of Britain's protectorate. Nobody's asked us if we want this to happen. And suddenly the Labour government have decided to act upon a decision made by this arbitrary, European Court of Justice, who say we must give it back to Mauritius, even though they've never owned it. It would appear that he's gone along with it.
I just hope that Keir Starmer hasn't used a whole load of political capital to get this over the line with Trump, saying to Trump, well, please sign this off and I'll give you X, Y and Z. Because this deal shouldn't have this deal shouldn't.
This should never be being done.
And
he
shouldn't be listening.
And Trump has made a mistake here. You know, there'll be people listening to this who say, "Oh, you never disagree with Donald Trump." And I think on this one I do, because I don't think he should have signed it off. I think he should have questioned it more, and I think he should have said, "Actually, who wants this?" Because certainly the Czechoslovakians don't want it. We don't want it in Britain, and the only reason it's being done is because David Lammy's frightened of a judge, you know, from the European Court of Justice.
And he had the briefing from Lord Hermer, you know, and lawyers, you know. You can always find a lawyer who can give you a certain opinion that you need to be cautious.
Yes.
And actually, the lawyers you want are the lawyers who say, "Listen, why don't you just do this? And we'll try and get it over the line. We don't need to particularly worry. There are millions of things to fret about and worry about. This is not it.
This is one of the first things. It was one of the first things that they decided to lock horns with, wasn't it? When they first got in July, suddenly Chagos Islands were getting sold off. We were all going, "Well, when did you decide to do that?"
Well, it was the Tories who decided to do it because they just fed into this mindset of lawyers in the Foreign Office who said, "Well, we need to." You know, there's been this ruling where there was a Chinese judge and there was a Russian judge.
Well, I mean, the Tories decided to start the process to see if it was something they should do, but they didn't actually go along and do it.
But somebody should have come. You know, what I would have hoped for is somebody actually comes along, Mike, and says, "You know what? No, we're not going to do it because it's £90 million a year. Okay, that's not a huge amount of money, but this is potentially a lease running to 99 years. I mean, it could amount, if you go with inflation, it could run up into the billions.
Yeah, it could.
And that is...
Well, Nigel Farage has said it could cost as much as 56 billion over the course of years, you know. But the whole, just the sense of giving something back to somebody who never had it in the first place and then paying them to take it away. I mean, I've likened it to somebody buying a second-hand car from you. You know, and they turn up, they look at the car, they don't really want it, but you say, no, please take the car, and I'll give you 500 quid to take it away. I mean, that's what it's like.
But it's also, you know, it's the extent of the Chinese influence in places like in Mauritius.
Yeah.
You know, they've got in there, they're investing in that economy,
right.
and we're retreating, and the Chinese... You know, they're not messing about, and you've got to worry that, you know, we're having now to do this deal with the Mauritian government in order to secure the Chagos Islands, because the Chinese are bearing down their necks. That's not a good way to do.
It's really not.
That's not a good way to do business.
And the sense is that Trump is kind of just dismissing it out of hand because it's very far away. You know, and that he's not really that interested. But I think he should be more interested, and I think somebody should tell him to be more interested. Speaking of lawyers that you can find to get any kind of decision-making process explained to you, how about a fake lawyer? Let's get Jonathan Reynolds talking about tariffs. He's not a lawyer.
It appears from what we know, and of course only the President can make these decisions, that perhaps no country in the world will be exempted from the initial decisions that might come tomorrow. We've engaged on a potential way through this because that's in the UK's national interest. I believe the existing trade between the US and the UK is a fair and strong and balanced relationship. I think we can actually make that better, not just avoid negative consequences. So look, tomorrow is not a deadline. It doesn't rule out us reaching agreement. And I feel the position that we have put the UK in is that it gives us the maximum opportunity to do what is necessary for UK businesses and investors and make sure we've got the potential to reach agreement if that is indeed what the US wants to do.
They must love it when he turns up at the White House. Can you imagine? I mean, dearie me. Yeah, that's the best we've got. He's the chief negotiator, you know, for us. Blimey. Anyway, listen, we've got lots to talk about. Jeremy Kyle back on ITV last night. We'll play a bit of that. We get also Robert Jenrick, who had a real barnstormer of a speech in the Commons yesterday, attacking, what's her name, Shabana Mahmood, over the sentencing review panel. He's calling now for the sacking of the guy that runs it. I tend to agree with him. 19 minutes past 6, back after this.
don't tend to tell the Americans what to do in their own country, and usually, the president or the vice president of the United States wouldn't really be interfering in domestic politics in the UK. So yeah, huge part of me says that. But at the same time, I really do think that they have a point, particularly in this case. I mean, these buffer zones are 150 metres away from any abortion clinics. Now, if protesters are standing outside those clinics, they're hurling abuse at women, they're threatening them, then of course something should be done. They should be arrested.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 21 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham. Lots and lots of stories around this morning as well, of course, about the latest situation regarding the Harry harassment case. Charity boss bullied by Meg trolls is what it says on the front page of The Sun. The charity chief who accused Prince Harry of harassment has shut down her social media after she was trolled by Sussex squad backers of the Duke and his wife Meghan. This is the story is going to run and run. It's putting Prince Harry in a pretty difficult position. He's also, unbelievably, been using friends to tell people in the media how upset he is by it all. He's basically accusing this woman of using the race card, which is perhaps the funniest thing he's ever said, because normally that's his job, isn't it, to use the race card? But we'll come back to that. Theo Usherwood's here with me. Let's have a look at Robert Jenrick yesterday. We've been following this story for about a week now, maybe more. The Sentencing Council recommendations and guidelines, which were basically to give people different treatment depending on their ethnic minority status, depending on their sexuality, depending on all manner of things, their gender. A woman should get less time in prison than a man. You know, a trans woman should get even less time in prison than a woman. You know, just ridiculous stuff. Finally, it turns out that Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, wrote a letter to ask them to completely ignore it. They ignored that, but it's now the case that they have suspended this particular guidance. Robert Jenrick got up in the House of Commons yesterday and had quite a bit to say to the Justice Secretary.
After he has brought the Sentencing Council into total disrepute, can she honestly say at the dispatch box that she has confidence in the head of the Sentencing Council, Lord Justice Davis? Yes or no? And if she does, is she aware that yesterday he took to the airways in an astonishing departure from the expected standards of judicial conduct to advocate for abolishing short sentences, especially for hyper-prolific offenders, effectively instructing lower courts to follow suit? It's time for him to go, and if she won't sack him for this, what would it take?
A lot of people said, now that is a proper Conservative leader speech. Now that is something that perhaps Kemi Badenoch should have said. And of course, what I said to Kemi Badenoch when she was here was, you know, you're quite happy to let Robert Jenrick do what he does, and she seems to be.
She hasn't got the clout to tell him not to do what she does.
And when I asked Robert Jenrick if she was OK with it, he said, well, we all work as part of the same team. But he certainly seems to be taking front and centre space away from any of the big announcements that she makes, isn't he?
Yeah, he's performed very well in the Commons, and he's performed well on social media.
Yeah.
He's done a lot of media. He's a law, you know, Kemi Badenoch's point of view, make no mistake about it, he's a law unto himself.
Yes.
But, you know, he's clearly trying to show a particular wing of the Conservative Party that he has got the what it takes to lead the Conservative Party as and when they decide to pull the trigger on Kemi Badenoch's leadership.
Yeah, absolutely right. She's in the papers today as well saying free speech is at risk. She sided with Washington in a row over anti-abortion protests in the UK because J.D. Vance, of course, has been saying for a long time that free speech is a problem in Britain. Trump said it yesterday that the tariffs may be tied to free speech. And Kemi Badenoch, and they've set out various different cases in Britain. The Hertfordshire case, this one about a woman called Livia Tosiki-Bolt with a handwritten sign saying here to talk if you want. You know, this is a big anti-abortion kind of case that's going on. But also, she's basically saying Britain should not be persecuting people for expressing themselves over abortion rights and very many other things. And it does look, if you look from abroad, if you look from America, that the free speech in this country is at risk, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, and this was an extraordinary statement. I mean, it got glossed over because it was put out on a Sunday night and the Telegraph picked up on it yesterday from the Secretary of the Department of State, Marco Rubio's department, which turned around and said, well, and highlighting this case of this lady who'd stood outside an abortion clinic with this sign, here to talk if you want. I think the message from that state, from her protest was, this is a peaceful protest and we want to offer another option regardless of your views on abortion.
And this is on top of that second case, wasn't it, where the guy was sort of arrested for silently praying. And, when you look at that from the outside, you kind of go, well, how do you know he's silently praying? How do you know what he's doing?
And of course, in the United States, there's a much harder worldview towards abortion. I mean, they don't take the same view that we do, that is taken in Europe. And I think what's interesting about this case is that the lengths to which this administration is willing to go in order to assert itself, at a granular level. This is one case in the UK, and make no mistake about it, the Trump administration is willing to come in and say, we're going to stand up for this if you want a trade deal. And we need to be... This is the dilemma for Keir Starmer. It's a dilemma for Rachel Reeves. It's a dilemma for the UK government. Is how do you manage that? And actually, do you have to have a much more attack away from a scenario where we have police turning up at parents' houses because they've criticised...
and then doubling down on it, as they did yesterday. The police chief in Hertfordshire saying that they did the right thing. He said perhaps we could have handled it differently, but he's essentially said, they were harassing the school enough for us to get involved, which is bonkers.
But this stuff's being followed. This stuff is clearly being followed in the United States by the administration, and they have a concern about it. And regardless of our opinion, I think and regardless of an opinion that's being held by ministers in the British government, I think what needs to happen is there needs to be a conscious effort to recognise that even the smallest thing, like what's happened out, the very, in the grand scheme of everything that's happened in Britain, this is a minute event.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a massive story in Britain.
But they are willing to get into it, the Americans.
But it's a bigger story in a way in America, because America's view now of Britain is that it's a country overrun with illegal migrants, which is true, and it's a country where free speech is very much at risk, which is also true. And if you take a step back from actually being in this country and look at it as if you were looking at it from, space, that's the impression you would get.
Yes, and what Trump wants, and what his officials and his appointees want, is for Britain to take this stuff seriously. And if Britain gets into line with the Trump administration, then it is much more likely we're going to get a trade deal on favourable terms. But then you contrast that to what Keir Starmer has said, where he has said he will not do a deal that is not in the British interest, in the national interest. And there's a dissonance there. There's a gap, and you get the feeling that actually the British government don't appreciate this level of interference and are willing to push back on it. But that at the same time... But
Starmer, of course, is so terrified of upsetting Trump that he doesn't want to push back too hard.
No.
But instead, he's got to wake up every morning hoping that there won't be another free speech case that comes up, which we get wrong.
But I think it offers, PMQ's coming up today. I think it offers, Kemi's given, made these comments. I think it offers her a real opportunity to make a point. She's not had PMQs has not been what she's needed it to be. She's not performed
well
as she needs to.
And also, you can certainly say that the free speech issue is not one that he can fire back at her and say, well, we inherited a free speech problem from the Tories, because you didn't. Actually, the Labour government made it worse.
She needs to start nailing PMQs, and I think this is a potentially, I'm sure her team would look at this and think, actually, this is potentially a good place to start, because not just in her performance, but in her in the way she's selected questions at PMQs.
And what she then does with what he answers it with, because quite often she doesn't go for the kill. But let's talk about something else just for a brief moment, because last night Jeremy Kyle made his return to ITV. He's back, of course, this afternoon doing Drive right here on Talk, and he talked about his return to radio. But here he is on ITV Life Stories, talking about how he loved the show that he did, the Jeremy Kyle show, and why it was popular.
Did it come from a place of caring and liking?
But it's difficult, isn't it? Because, again, half would say that's what they needed. Others would say it's a bit judgmental, isn't it? My view was always, that's what it is. You've seen it. I can't change it. We didn't fabricate it. We didn't set out to do it. It was a show that lasted for 15 years that I spent a long time thinking I should apologise for, but it was hugely successful and it helped a lot of people. Obviously, we'll talk about the postscript, which is very sad. But in terms of what it was, I think we would be wrong as an audience to look down our noses at it. It was massively successful at that time.
And Margaret has sent a very nice note to say, really enjoyed Jeremy Carl's life story last night. Nice to see you in the front row, Mike. I was. I mean, I had to leave before the end, unfortunately, because I had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. But there we are. You can always watch it again. Let's get a new voice note from Walt.
Let me break it down plain and true, working double shifts just to make these payments due. Every month they take more, but what do they do? Streets getting worse, man, I'm paying their revenue. They say budget cuts, but I see their fancy cars while we dodge these craters like the shooting star. These streets are killing me, these taxes draining me. How much more can one man take?
Very good. Walt, thank you very much indeed. I don't know if Walt's American or whether he's just put on an American accent. That's on Awful April, which is what we were calling it yesterday. There we go.
That's fantastic.
It's very good, isn't it?
You get some really high-quality contributions on the voice notes.
Well, people, I mean, especially imagine being that alert at this time in the morning, 6:31, he's composing a song.
It was in tune. I mean, it was great.
It was very good. Very good indeed. It could be the beginning of something because, like I say, the tariff problem is going to be, you're going to see lots of chin stroking today on other media. We're not going to do that here. We're not going to tell you that, you've got a massive problem coming because of the Trump tariffs, because nobody really knows. Sean from Bridlington makes a good point. He says, Mike, a 2025 Ford Mustang GT starts from 58,470 quid here. In the US, it costs from 36,037 quid. No wonder we don't buy more American cars. Trump is right about trade. Well, this is the thing, and British cars actually cost less money in America than they cost in Britain. Go figure that one out. 32 minutes past 6.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:34. I'm Mike Graham. Theo Usherwood is here. We are here, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock. Tony from Barrow in Furness says, Mike, can the people of Chagos not stop Starmer giving away their island by taking Starmer to the ECHR? Well, that's a good one. I don't know what the answer is to that, actually. You would think that it might apply, given that Britain's involved, but I presume the European Court for Human Rights does not represent the Chagos Islands.
No, it's outside of
far outside of Europe. But it affects people who might be from Chagos who are living in Britain. So I wonder if some smart lawyer could do that. But we shall see. Here's one from Natasha. It says, morning, Mike. All Trump is doing is what Western leaders seem to have forgotten, that their people and their country should come first. I couldn't agree more. Welfare reform on the front of the Times. This has backfired again for Rachel Reeves. Apparently, Labour's welfare reforms will result in 400,000 more people signing off as unfit for work. So their plan to actually have fewer people has gone completely wrong, hasn't it?
Yeah, this is down to the government's own impact assessments. Look, what they did was they tried to make it harder to claim the top rate of benefits, and of course they're cutting the lower rate of benefits, so that you are then more incentivised if you're on that lower rate to then go out
to
and
go
get a
back
job.
to get
But
a job.
The danger of doing that, of course, Mike, is that everybody, you know, these 400,000 are suddenly going to go, no, I need the top rate of
you're
benefits.
going to step up.
And suddenly they're going to step up because they don't want to step down.
Right.
And it's much easier to step up and get the higher rate of benefits than it is to step down. And of course, that would involve going into work. And if you have the high rate of benefits, of course, there's no reassessment in terms of going back to work. Can you work?
And this is what I predicted, because I said this at the time. You know, everybody in the history of welfare reform who's tried to reform the welfare state in this country has managed to get it massively wrong, because they always end up with the wrong result. They always end up going after the wrong people, affecting the wrong people, and the people who have been sort of swinging the lead and basically, you know, conning us out of free money are still doing it.
Yes, and they're more incentivised to do it. So they're more incentivised to get that step up and get that higher rate of benefits. That's what this impact assessment seems to be saying. And you'd have thought that if this was the government's own impact assessment, there'd have been some smart official that might have actually put their hand up beforehand and said, this is going to be the impact.
And this is again the problem with making announcements and then sort of trying to fit the policy around the announcement, because they don't give it any thought. It says here there are 1.8 million people on the limited capability for work or work-related activity element of universal credit who receive £5,000 a year more than job seekers and who are not required to prepare for getting a job. So that's a lot of people, isn't it? 1.8 million. Surely what they ought to be doing is trying to help those people into some kind of work, not to force them into it, but to kind of convince them one way or the other that you might actually feel better, you might be able to do more with your life if you can actually do some kind of work, even if it's part-time.
And the government's counter to this, of course, is that they've got a £1 billion employment support programme, which, if it works, can get people back into the workplace. But this is not, you know, Tories have accused Labour of incompetence, and this is really important stuff, because, you know, these cuts to the welfare budget were designed and were necessary in order for Rachel Reeves to balance the books effectively.
But the fact is the money hasn't come in yet.
No, and if they go the wrong way and we don't balance the books, then she's going to have to find a different way of getting the money in. And the only other way, if you're not going to cut spending, the only other way to do it is to increase taxes. And they said, you know, after the October the 30th budget, where they put up national insurance contributions by 25 billion, tax overall by 40 billion, that they weren't going to come back and raise taxes by a significant extent. But if we combine, you know, the effect of what could happen in the next few weeks, months, in terms of these tariffs, with the fact that the measures that we're seeing to cut spending don't take effect. In fact, they end up doing the opposite. We end up spending more, or we end up spending more.
Because again, I mean, I was looking at.
But it's you and me and your listeners who are going to have to pay.
But a tweet put out by Luke Pollard, who I interviewed last week, about you know, what it is that we've achieved, and everything that he put out as a kind of a 5-point you know, achievements list was something that haven't happened yet. And everything that they're saying they've done, they haven't done. You know, they haven't reformed welfare because we haven't seen the actual reform yet. They haven't actually saved any money from getting private school VAT in, because we haven't seen the results in the state sector, where they're spending even more money. You know, we haven't seen the extra money coming in. Yesterday, Rachel Reeves was writing in The Guardian, crowing about how, you know, we're making people better off by rising, making the minimum wage rise. But in fact, that affects a very small number of people, and it will, in the end result will be that it will cost more to business, and therefore people will lose their jobs. So, you know, there are no achievements going on here.
No, and if you look at, let's say, the VAT rise, you know, there's a challenge going through the courts right now, particularly around children with additional needs, SEND needs.
Right. And this is the one that Rachel Reeves has hired a load of privately educated barristers to defend, right?
That's the one.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, just checking.
You can go through there.
I mean, just unbelievable, isn't it?
But you know, these are families. You know, there is, children have a right, every child in this country has a right to an education regardless of their needs. And if these children can't be educated in the state sector, in the mainstream state sector, and then their parents are actually, because you have to remember, these parents are doing the taxpayer a massive favour, because what they're doing is they're saying, actually, my child has additional needs, they need that extra support in the classroom, wherever it is. You know, I'm not going to even go through the process of trying to get what's known as an EHCP to sort of get that support. I'm just going to pay for it myself. And they go off and they pay for it themselves, and now they're not going to be able to pay for it themselves, and so they're going to, you would think, if they can't get their if fees become so expensive, they're then going to bounce back to the state sector. And we're just going to see more challenges.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. Speaking of which, NHS satisfaction levels. This is a good one, and I know we talk about the NHS an awful lot on this show, and I want to hear from all of you today because I'm still banging the drum about this is another sort of boast that's being made by Keir Starmer and everybody, Rachel Reeves and everybody else, that basically, waiting lists are coming down. Waiting lists are not coming down. We are now beginning to establish that there is a pattern emerging of where people are getting given appointments to, get their finally, after waiting for 10 months or something, they're going to get their procedure, and then just before it happens, they get it cancelled and they get moved onto another list.
But they tick the box.
So it looks as though the lists are actually going down when they're not. But this shows that I think it's something like only 21% of people are now satisfied, which is down from 24% the previous year, and it's the lowest rate since polling began on the NHS since 1983. 59% of adults are dissatisfied with the health service, which is up 7 percentage points in a year, and I'm not surprised.
No, I'm not surprised. And what I think we keep on hitting, this roadblock we keep on hitting with the NHS, is that the metrics, how we measure the NHS, seems to be the wrong way of doing it.
Yeah.
And we seem to be saying, well, before anything else, it has to be free at the point of use.
Yeah.
And it has to be available to everyone.
Right.
I think it does have to be free at the point of use for those who can't afford private treatment or can't afford private.
But it's
healthcare.
Not all free at the point of use, is it?
But certain dentistry isn't.
No.
For example.
Right.
But what I think the focus should be with the NHS is on outcomes.
Yeah.
People getting better and the NHS being effective in making people better, and of course patient satisfaction.
Yeah.
What's the point of having a service if everybody hates the service?
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
And if the service is as bad as it currently is, which we know it is, and we know that because people get in touch with us literally every day with stories of tales of woe, of things that get cancelled, things that didn't work properly, ridiculous situations where you just can't get what you want.
But there's a private medical sector that's there to potentially take the strain off the NHS.
And again, a lot of people are using that, and a lot of people are doing the taxpayer a favour by doing that, and doing the NHS a favour by doing that.
But somehow, if you're opting for private medical care, that's seen as a way of hurting the NHS, and I don't think it's
really
that simple, and I don't think we need to be. I don't think we should be ideological about it. We should be focused, and the government should be focused on what works. How are we going to get the NHS so that it's better? People are happy with it, and people get, when they access the NHS, they're getting better, and then they're getting back to work.
Yeah, right.
They're not having to wait for weeks on sick. They're not having to wait at home for an operation that doesn't happen. This stuff needs to.
It's
basic stuff.
Basic stuff. Funny story of the day, which results from two different newspaper stories. Provisional data from the Met Office showed that England blasted its brightest March since 1910. Apparently, when records began, 185.8 hours of sunshine. I'm just looking out the window, and another incredible sunrise. A great big orange ball rising over there in the east, which looks fantastic. Another really, really warm day today, I think. But guess what? Of course, the doom and gloom merchants have got their hands on it, because according to a piece in the Telegraph, there's now a wildfire warning that's been put out across most of the country because of warm and dry conditions. I mean, come on, guys, we're not living in Australia, we're not living in California, we're living in Britain.
Can we just have a?
Can we not have wildfire alerts, please?
Can we just have a weather story where it's not Armageddon?
I know.
That's what I want. I want a weather story where it's like the sun's shining, life's great. And get out and get a suntan.
Here we go, yeah.
Go sit in the pub with a glass of rosé.
This is Catherine Chalk, a meteorologist at the Met Office, basically. Londoners urged not to have barbecues in open spaces or on balconies, and to throw all of their rubbish away to avoid creating a fire hazard. Well, it's bad luck if you live in Birmingham, isn't it? There's more than a fire hazard over there. There's a couple of rats. Yesterday, I heard David Bull saying the rats are now the size of pigs. I don't know where he got that from. They're supposed to be the size of cats. The size of cats, right? She goes, we can't be specific on locations due to the nature of wildfires. Best to stick with the weather conditions, with the dry air, breezy and warm conditions, hence the warning. Slightly cooler conditions with the onshore breeze along eastern coast. I mean, come off it, darling. We're not going to, there's not going to be wildfires breaking out in the first week of April.
No.
Are there?
No, we just...
They just aren't.
No.
And if there are, there's somebody setting fire to stuff.
Yeah. No, it just... If it's
I was wearing a coat to work this morning, for heaven's sake.
If it's windy, we have the wrong kind of leaves on the train line. If it's too cold, then nobody can go to work and everybody stays at home because they can't get out of bed and go and commute. we live in a really temperate weather climate. I don't think we need to panic every time.
I mean, have they not heard of the Labrador current, these people? Alan says this in the EU. He says, Mike, you're absolutely right about the outside view of Britain. As a Brit in the European Union, I'm horrified by the state of the country since I left in 2011. That's why the EU leaders love Starmer too, as they can see the destruction playing out just like they wanted since Brexit. The USA is right. The country is becoming a dump. And that's really true and sad to see, really, as well. And it's being driven that way and being driven further and further down the gurgler by this Labour government, who don't seem to have a clue about how to do anything. Coming up, we'll talk some more about Prince Harry and also Ryanair suing the air traffic control systems. You might remember, I think it was just last summer, wasn't it, where air traffic control fell over and the guy who was supposed to fix it couldn't fix it for 90 minutes because he was working from home. And the first thing he had to do was jump in his car and drive down to the computer and try and sort it all out. Absolute madness. It's 6:46.
Tend to tell the Americans what to do in their own country.
He was going to end the war in Ukraine, on the first day, and he's going to fix the economy, and we can all see, around the world what's happening, especially here in America. I mean, it's just, the economy is tanking. He's literally tanking the economy, a one-man effort, which is unbelievable. But I think he's far more dangerous than people like J.D. Vance and Elon Musk even understand, because he has no moral compass. This man would sell his own children if it satisfied his ego. Literally. I mean, I'm not exaggerating.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:48. I'm Mike Graham. Theo Usherwood is here as well. Let's have a look at the front page of The Sun, which we haven't done yet properly. This is this rumbling on story about Harry and the charity boss over in Africa, Sentebale's chief, Dr. Sophie Chandorka, who was on TV over the weekend, basically accusing Harry of bullying, accusing him of harassment, saying that basically she was treated very, very badly by him, and he's now sort of washed his hands of the organisation altogether.
Yeah, so Harry resigned along with the board, the board of trustees from this charity, and left the organisation because they couldn't work with this lady, Sophie Chandorka.
So they say.
So they say, right? She then does an interview where she says, it was all very well. This was at the weekend, saying it was all very well Harry going off to the United States, but actually his pull was being part of the royal family. Right. That's what got the donors in the door for the charity to want to support this really important organisation. And there was also a row because he just wanted to turn up at a polo match with a Netflix crew as part of a documentary.
And she was worried that he was raising money for the charity outside of Africa instead of using Africa as the kind of the main point of the whole thing.
Yes, and so that she does this interview, and it seems that as a result of this, that the trolls online associated with the Team Sussex
have piled in.
Have piled
and they are
in.
awful. I mean, we've all seen what they can do over time. You know, they used to pick on almost anyone who was in any way critical of them.
They're called the Sussex Squad, jumping in with, you know, accusing her of being a fraud, jumping on a bandwagon of hate. Centre-Barley spokesman said Dr. Chandorkar deleted her Twitter account due to the proliferation of online bullying. She's accused Harry, of course, of harassment and bullying at scale after he and other trustees quit the charity last week. So this is... You know, Harry,
it's a very bad look for Harry.
It's not a great look.
Because he put out a guy, there was a guy that was talking to the Mail yesterday, who's a sort of old Etonian mate of his, who said that he was authorised to speak on behalf of Harry, because Harry's been very quiet about this, and they've always said, we'll never do anything through sources, we'll always be direct and talk to the press directly. This guy more or less came out and said that this is all a bit of a storm in a teacup, and basically this particular woman of colour didn't like the fact that there was another woman of colour who was kind of bigger than her and more influential than her, and that's, you know, and it's quite a sort of racist statement when you think about it.
It's not a good look. And Harry, if you think about what he's done, he's gone to America to tap into that wholesome, culture on the west coast of America, and suddenly now he's being accused of
bullying
and harassment.
Yeah, and he's been not only bullying and harassment, but also he's accused her of using the race card, which is so ridiculous, because that's what Meghan and Harry always do, right? They always do that.
Marina Hyde has a very points this out in The Guardian of all places, Mike. So it's not just yourself who's noticing.
Yeah,
of course.
This is it. I mean, they're now universally recognised as the biggest hypocrites on the planet, and I don't think you have to be left wing or right wing to recognise that. You know, it's absolutely just a fact. But we'll have more on that, of course, later on in the show. But it is absolutely extraordinary that Harry has now been pretty much snookered by this woman because he's got nowhere to go. And because he hasn't denied any of it, we can only assume that there's a reason why he hasn't denied it, because it's true.
And of course, where you say he's got nowhere to go, he's only got his name to trade on. He hasn't got anything else. If you're royal, he hasn't got loads of business. He didn't leave the royal family with loads of business experience.
No.
He's only got his name to trade on. And if his name is sullied by this whole scandal, it's going to be very difficult for him to bring in that work with those companies like Spotify or Netflix or whatever.
Absolutely right. Big spread in the Sun. They've been doing a big series this week on Britain's broken borders. Only yesterday we had some Albanians sort of thumbing their noses at Britain and saying, you know, it's a great country, we can come here and get a free hotel. Today they've got Sacre Bleu as a headline. French admit they must do more to stop the boats. But on top of that is a picture of some migrants playing football in northern France, obviously terrified for their lives. In the midst of running away from a war zone, they've managed to get a quick five-a-side game organised.
And of course you can be deported back to the safe country, your first safe country where you find yourself.
Right.
And if you're having a game of football...
It doesn't look that dangerous, does it? Really? I mean, you know, call me old-fashioned. Also, the other story in the Mail is all about how much it costs us to actually deport Albanian criminals, because
it's
again,
a lot of money.
Keir Starmer made a big thing of this yesterday, talking about locking people up in his immigration summit, going after people who shouldn't be in this country, getting special squads of people to literally go in and snatch them as they're in prison, put them on a plane, deport them. Well, apparently it now costs 537,000 quid to deport one Albanian criminal. I mean, I don't understand how it costs that kind of money. Are they sort of gold plating them and putting them on a plane, a private jet? I mean, it's
all of the legal challenges. Yeah, this is page 4 of the Mail.
Yeah,
and the Albanian, it cost the taxpayer 537.
How does it cost them that? I mean, these are the questions I'd like answered, because we get these numbers thrown at us, and you kind of go, well, why? You know, because for me to get a flight to Albania is probably what? 100 quid?
So the way they've done it is that under this scheme that the government had already in place, they were meant to deport 200 of the most serious offenders.
Yeah.
So we're talking murderers, sex predators, gangsters, all meant to be returned to Albania.
Yeah. And how many
under a
4.8? Thank you.
8.
Well, because they can't afford to send anyone. That's 4 million.
And it was
right
that's over 2 years.
2 years.
2 years.
So 4 a year.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
That's a success rate of what, less than 5%.
Yeah, I think that's technically not a success rate at all, really. Unbelievable stuff. They really should use Ryanair to do it, because I bet they could do it for a lot less money. They're in the papers on page 11 of the Sun today, suing Britain's air traffic control HQ for £5 million after a work-from-home engineer ruined 700,000 passengers' travel plans. This is from... I said this would happen. Do you remember this story when the air traffic control system sort of fell over and it affected millions of people around the world, because it wasn't just UK airspace that was affected. There were planes stuck in all kinds of places that were meant to come back here that couldn't come back here, and people were stranded for like a week.
Yes, and there's some jobs you just have to do in the office, Mike.
Right.
There's just some jobs you have to go in.
Yeah, because this guy gets the call to say, the computer's fallen over, and he went, right, I'll be right there, jump in a car, it'll be 90 minutes.
He tried to log on remotely because they all think they can manage. You can manage an air traffic control system from home.
Yes.
Which you can't, obviously. So he jumps in the car, but because of all the chaos at the airport, there's traffic chaos on the roads, and he can't get it. Can't get it to work.
Mark's just put it out. How can he log on if the system's gone down? I mean, it's a good point. You can't really, can you? But this is going to haunt Heathrow as well. My sense is that the Heathrow story has much more to run, because I think today the CEO, as I call him, Goodbye, he's up before the select committee today to answer for what he did.
He went back to bed, didn't he?
And why he went back to bed. Yeah. I mean, some suggestion that he said he was at an event, and then he went to Heathrow briefly, saw that everything was under control, which it wasn't, and then went home.
Went to bed. Apparently because key decisions were coming up later in the day. You just want somebody who's going to come in and go, right, I'm in charge, I'm the point man, I'm the chief executive, I'm being paid, hundreds of thousands of pounds a year to do this job.
I think he's paid $3 million a year.
$3 million.
Yeah, I think so.
$3 million a year. I'm being paid $3 million a year. I could just pull an all-nighter.
Yeah.
And I can be here, and I could just have extra cups of coffee.
Yeah.
And then when it's all sorted out and I've done the
and I can do the media round at 7 o'clock in the morning and say we fixed it, the airport's open again.
I think I need to go back to bed.
Yeah, unbelievable stuff.
What's wrong with this country? Deporting migrants at £500,000 a pop and working from home, so when the air traffic control system breaks down, we can't fix it.
I mean, it is absolutely and utterly ridiculous. We've got a voice note from Lee on the NHS. Let's have a listen.
Morning, Mike. Lee from Manchester. Just regarding the NHS waiting lists and the cancellations that are going on, I'll just let you know what's going on with mine. So basically, I've got a dodgy knee, and what's been happening is since October, I was given an appointment for the 10th of April to see a consultant. When it got close to the date, that was then cancelled until the 29th of May, and just recently I've got another letter saying it's now been cancelled until the 10th of July, which is a joke. So what I'll do is, when it gets closer to that date, if it's been cancelled again, I'll keep it up to date and let you know. Have a good show. Cheers, mate.
Yeah, please do. So this is what's happening with the NHS, and as I say, I kind of stumbled upon this because people started to tell me that they've been getting a lot of cancellations, and we waited a long time for getting access to their NHS appointment, and they finally suddenly got one. And so there's no doubt in my mind that the Labour government and Wes Streeting have ordered people to start making appointments for people, and then if you haven't got the bandwidth to actually do the procedure, just cancel it, and then they've come off the waiting list.
Yeah,
it's a very cynical ploy, and I'm sure this is what they're doing.
Yeah, it's a very you can hit the target. They're going to be, you put them on the waiting list within 18 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
You get to closer to the date, you've piled up that particular waiting list, that particular day for appointments, and you realise the hospital concerned can't do that, can't fulfil that obligation to do 10 operations or whatever, and so you cancel half of them.
Yeah.
And then of course then they have to rumble on, and of course that won't necessarily be shown up in the full statistics.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a shocking state of affairs. One final story on the front page of The Guardian. US officials apparently have been in touch with Ofcom about the problem of free speech in Britain, which tells you quite a lot about how concerned they all are about the situation over here.
Yes, it is. Ofcom, of course, is the regulator which is in charge of overseeing the broadcast industry and online in this country, and State Department officials. And this goes to the story of talking about what happened outside that abortion clinic.
Yeah.
And the US State Department getting involved in that.
Yeah.
If we get a trade deal or some sort of agreement with the United States, it's not going to come cheap. week because there's a very firm view in the White House about the way the world needs to be. And they don't take lightly to this
No, they
stuff.
won't. Absolutely right. Theo, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Theo Oshwood with a look at what's going on in the papers. We've got much more for you throughout the morning. We'll be back after the news.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips, in Leeds it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us carry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with our regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12.60. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks
How
ago.
much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Keeping it real.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 7. The sun is up and it is a beautiful looking sunrise, ladies and gentlemen. So if you're not up yet and you're not seeing it, it's time to have a peek out the window. It's going to be very warm. Believe it or not, the Met Office has issued some wildfire warnings, right? Because we've had a bit of a dry spell. I mean, do me a small favour. I don't think there's going to be any need for that sort of behaviour. It's April the 2nd, for heaven's sake. It's not even August, you know. The idea that somehow the ground is so dry, that it's like a tinderbox, and it's going to go up like Malibu in the middle of summer. I don't think so. 0344 499 1000. It's all about tariffs today. Trump's tariffs all over the front pages, of course. Everybody getting their knickers in a twist. The BBC absolutely beside themselves about how Donald Trump's going to ruin everything. The world's economies are going to collapse around us because Donald Trump's a selfish, horrible, ghastly man. Well, I'm afraid we do a different sort of take here at Talk, because we are the home of common sense. I don't think you should be worried. I think you stand by your beds. Don't be concerned about it. If you're completely worried about the fact that the Ford Mustang that you wanted to buy is now gone up by £30,000, maybe think about getting a different car. And if you've got more money than sense, obviously you wouldn't buy one of those anyway. Let's get Donald Trump's view on why he's actually doing it.
Tariffs are about making America rich again and making America great again, and it's happening, and it will happen rather quickly. There'll be a little disturbance, but we're okay with that. It won't be much.
Of course, some people think it will be quite a big deal. The front page of The Times this morning has got firms told to brace for the impact of Donald Trump's tariffs. They're saying there's going to be turbulent economic times. Well, what do you think there are at the moment? I mean, Rachel Reeves has already crashed the economy. I mean, there's not much more she can do to damage it. The White House have said that Liberation Day, as they're calling it today, is going to fix the wrongs of the past and restore the golden age of America. It's all about protectionism. It's all about making sure that the American economy recovers from the state that it's in, and it's got really nothing to do with propping up Europe or propping up the United Kingdom. You can have a view that Donald Trump should be more friendly towards the UK, that somehow Keir Starmer should be the man in the White House, the man with his hand on the shoulder of Donald Trump. You know, I've got a letter for you here from the King. Please don't give us any tariffs, all of that. Well, you know, that's not realistic. It's not real politics. That's not the world that we live in. We're going to be talking about that. Plus, of course, Harry and the state that he is in. He's on the front page of The Sun again because apparently the woman who runs the charity that he used to be in charge of has said that his supporters have now been so vile to her that she's had to come off social media. For heaven's sake. 0344 499 1000. We'll also talk about migrants. There's a picture of some migrants playing football. Shortly, just before that, they were fleeing a war zone. They seem to be safe enough in France. I don't know why they don't just bleeding well stay there. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. I've got a note here about Jonathan Reynolds, who is, of course, the fake solicitor, who is the business secretary. Morning, Mike, says Dave in South Gloucestershire. How the solicitor, who was never a solicitor, can talk about national interest when the pathetic government of which he is still unfathomably a part is buying the right to give away a chunk of our sovereign territory to the country who we will pay to receive it, against the wishes of those who live there, against the wishes of the British people, and, as far as I know, have never given a rational explanation of how this stupidity will benefit our country or, indeed, our national security or that of the West. Well, Dave, you make a very good point. Absolutely no idea why Jonathan Reynolds is still in the cabinet, and absolutely no idea why the Chagos Islands is being given away, and not just given away, but given away with a very handy chunk of money attached to it as well. Absolute madness. Let's talk to Joanna Bell, political journalist, and try and get some sense out of her about it. Joanna, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. How are you today?
I'm all right. I mean, I'm not one of those that's getting all hysterically carried away by the tariff conversation because, to a large extent, tariffs are baffling to most people. And Donald Trump's right to say, is he not, that an awful lot of countries have been putting tariffs on American goods for a very long time, including the UK and including Europe. So he's just having some of that back, isn't he?
Well, somewhat, but I mean, I don't think it's an I know you're very positive about what's going on, Mike, but I don't think it's an exaggeration to say we are facing a 1930s style depression.
Yeah, no, I'm not particularly positive about what's going on, but what I'm saying is that the economies of most of the Western world are already down in the deep, deep doo-doo because of all the debt that we're in, because of all the borrowing that governments have done over the years.
Well, that's it, but it's about to go from bad to worse, Mike. And, you know, the British Empire, you know, the whole empire was built on free trade, and that's what made it so great. And now we're being hit with these tariffs. I mean, what Trump's trying to do is stimulate business enterprise in the United States.
Right.
So he thinks by imposing these tariffs, it'll force companies to set up in America. But that could take years. And by that stage, you know, we could be already in the midst of World War III.
My goodness me, you really are a pessimist, aren't you?
I know I am a pessimist.
I mean, what do you think? So what's going to come first, the world's economic collapse or World War III? I mean, go on.
I don't know. Well, look, it makes us very vulnerable, okay? And don't forget, Britain doesn't have the EU to shoulder the responsibility. Britain is on its own, essentially. And, you know,
but that's a good thing, isn't it? Because he's more likely to put more tariffs on the EU than he is on Britain in the end.
Possibly, and you know, as Ursula von der Leyen said, you know, she's going to retaliate. So, you know, if Iran and Russia see, you know, this unrest with it, you know, between the Western world, they're going to attack because our defense budget is down. You know, we really don't have the resources to go to war, so we could end up. Not. Yeah, exactly, and it's not going to hit China as bad, you know. So it's really going to be. I think it's going to be terrible. Why do you think it's going to be good? What's the positive that you see?
Well, the positive is not so much a positive as it's not a negative, you know. At the end of the day, you know, we've been imposing tariffs on America for quite a long time. America is now imposing some tariffs on us. And it's a negotiable, I mean, it's not very often that I would ever give any credence to Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary. But as he says, it's an open conversation. So he might put these tariffs on because it's Liberation Day, and he might take them off the next day. I mean, look what he did with Mexico. Look what he did with Canada. You know, one minute he put tariffs on and the next day he took them off. And there's an awful lot of people that jump to Donald Trump's tune, particularly in the media. They get all worked up about something and then suddenly it doesn't happen. or he reverses it, and he can do
It's
that.
true.
But, you know, for example, Donald Trump is quite right to say America doesn't really sell any cars very much into Europe, but an awful lot of cars get sold out of Europe into America. So he sees that as a kind of, I don't know, an unfair system. And so that's why in America, an awful lot of American cars only get sold in America, because they make their own cars and they buy them. And I don't think there's anything wrong with protecting an industry. I mean, we've lost pretty much our entire car industry because we've allowed imports to completely flood the market from Southeast Asia and China. So we now basically hardly make any cars. The only cars we now make are high-end cars, really, which we sell to rich countries like America. Jaguar Land Rover, Bentley, Rolls-Royce, you know, Lotus, all of those kind of expensive cars. And if people don't buy those cars now because there's a tariff on them, I would be surprised, because most people who buy those cars will buy them anyway, and they're cheaper. They're already cheaper in America. You can buy a Land Rover in America for less money than you buy one here.
Right, but I mean, look, that you're talking about cars, but the markets, you know, they're going to plummet even more than they already are. That could have serious, you know, repercussions on you know, everybody's wealth.
Well, I mean, again, you know, the volatility in the markets is something that we've had from the year dot, haven't we? I mean, you know, the problem for the markets is when they're not volatile, because nobody makes any money.
Well, that's exactly it, you know. But, you know, you mentioned that, you know, people, you know, are going to buy their Lotus. There's always going to be people who, you know, need these you know, products. But at the end of the day, it's really making a bad situation worse in Britain. And we hope, like what you said, that he is just bluffing. And, you know, when he does his announcement today, that it's going to be much better than we anticipated.
I mean, what I will say is it's definitely bad news for Keir Starmer. It's very bad news for Rachel Reeves, because they have already taken us down a very, very dangerous path to a place where we shouldn't really be. You know, they've crashed the economy already. You know, the budget that she gave out in October has been an absolute disaster. And then the budget statement last week didn't make it any better. I mean, I've got a story here saying that the new approval rating after the spring statement, according to YouGov, is down even further. Even more people disapprove of this government. Disapproval rating of 68%.
Well, you have to admit, they were handed a poison chalice. You know,
No, they weren't. They weren't. No? When were they handed a poison chalice? The economy last June was an awful lot better than it is now.
Well, that's true, you know, but things happened since then. And yeah, it has been mismanaged. I mean, Rachel, with all due respect to her, you know, it's been hard for her. You know, she's obviously in over her head.
Yeah, she can't do the job. That's because she's not a proper economist.
Exactly. Well, she lied on her CV, and so did your business secretary that you mentioned earlier, Jonathan Reynolds. He's meant to be a solicitor, right?
Yeah, fake solicitor, I call him. I mean, the whole cabinet is full of fakery. I mean, that's the problem. You know, you've got people doing jobs. You've got the business secretary who's never run a business. You've got the Chancellor of the Exchequer running the economy, who's never run anything vaguely like an economy, or as an economist even. She used to work in a complaints department at a local bank. I mean, you know, they are all, you know, they've all risen out of unions or out of law firms. They've not worked in the real world, really, and they don't know what they're doing. It's it's simple to see.
Well, she's getting a lot of complaints, so she's definitely, you know, got the constitution for that. She's getting a lot of criticism.
And also, almost everything they do, they get the opposite results of what they wanted. I mean, this morning we've got a story saying that their welfare reform, which was supposed to take more people off the welfare lists and put them back into work, is actually going to result in 400,000 people more being declared unfit for work. So, you know, the VAT that they put onto private schools has ended up costing them more money because the people moving their kids out of private schools are putting them into state schools, putting a strain on that. They've got to be sent in taxis to go to schools because there isn't any room for them. Ridiculous. You know, everything they're doing is having the opposite effect.
Well, it's absolutely ridiculous because, you know, when she brought in all these national insurance hikes, what else? Increase in stamp duty.
Yeah.
It really, really, you know, has had an effect, because at the end of the day, people are going on welfare and going on long-term sick because there's no motivation for them to actually work, because people who are working full-time jobs are in a less are less wealthy than people on benefits. So what's the incentive, Mike?
That's right, and that is the problem. And in order for them to change that, the methods that they've put in, though, are backfiring because they've chosen the wrong methods. They basically said they're going to take disability allowance away from people from the lower levels of disability. And so instead of making those people go back to work, those people are saying, well, actually, we're now going to apply for the higher level. And that's what's going to happen. So there's going to be 400,000 more of them are going to be unfit for work permanently.
Well, that's it. And I really don't think the country can take the enormous toll, you know, and we need the people to work. So somebody's going to have to come in and, you know, come up with a great idea or some motivation or incentive for people to get back into work, you know, because if this happened in America, if you were sick in America, no one would look after you. You have to work.
Right. You get, I think, 6 months unemployment there, don't you? And after that, you have to go find yourself a job, otherwise you're on the streets, basically.
Well, that's it, you know, and maybe Britain should bring in those measures too, because there's no way that this can continue. Nobody should be on long-term welfare.
No, it doesn't. Well, also, it's unsustainable. We can't afford it. It's as simple as that. You know, Britain as a nation is bankrupt already. This is what I'm saying. You know, the tariffs may or may not add to that, but at the end of the day, even if the tariffs weren't happening, you know, our economy is about to take a very, very serious dive into off a cliff.
Well, that's it. It looks like we're, you know, about to enter a recession, a worldwide recession with what's happening in America. But, you know, you're positive and you're making me positive now. So I'll be very excited to hear Trump's speech tonight.
Get yourself out in the sunshine. You know, if you can afford to get a glass of wine, get one, because it's going to go up in price pretty soon. You won't be able to afford it. And just enjoy it while you can. That'd be my advice.
Yeah, I'm vodka and tonic.
Fair enough. Thank you very much indeed. Jonah Bell, there, a political journalist, who started off being a pessimist, but is now, obviously, after having the Morning Glory treatment, is, of course, now positive. Because you've got to be. You know, the fact that people are walking around with their heads down, going, oh, Donald Trump's punishing Britain. No, he's not. He really isn't. Let's get a voice note from Nana.
Morning, Mike. Just listening to the last caller who left a voice note saying about dodgy knee. Yeah, well, I'm very lucky, and I had some private healthcare from work, so my dodgy knee, within 12 hours, had from an appointment with the online GP, had a referral to a consultant within 10 days, and then a week later now I'm going to have an MRI scan and then a follow-up appointment, all within literally weeks. So I know, very lucky, but it does show the other side of the coin, and I don't know how. Maybe some way the two systems can meet in the middle.
Yeah. No, you make a very good point, and it does show you, because I'm similarly lucky enough to have private healthcare if I need it. And the bottom line is that when you do go to private healthcare, you can see how much quicker it is, how much easier it is, and how much better run it is, quite frankly. It's as simple as that. And yes, there is room. I mean, already, you know, there's all this nonsense talked by people like Wes Streeting about it must be free at the point of sale, which of course it isn't for an awful lot of people. But they also, NHS uses the private sector as a kind of overflow system. You know, they use private hospitals, they use private doctors, they use private dentists, you know, because they can't handle what it is that they're doing. And at the end of the day, there is a kind of a two-tier system, but a lot of people from the NHS are able to use the private system, but the NHS then pays through the nose for it. Ridiculously, because they're in government, they don't know how to run anything. Andy in Cleethorpes says this, morning, Mike, here's an idea for you. Instead of all these lefty lawyers defending Albanians, Iranians and Syrians, why don't they start defending the rights of the British people who have the NHS appointments cancelled time after time after time? Keep up the good work. And Dan from Kent says this, morning, Mike, this analogy that Trump is a playground bully is just liberal, naive nonsense. Trump is just throwing a grenade into the European bankrupt economies. COVID has destroyed us, and sanctions on Russia and net zero madness is only making us poorer. Exactly right. I mean, if anybody's sitting there thinking that we are really, really in good economic shape and now Donald Trump's going to come and smash it all to bits, I mean, you are barking up the wrong tree. And let me tell you this as well from this survey that's been done on the NHS. Patients basically getting more and more dissatisfied with the NHS. It's a British Social Attitudes Research paper, and it says this, our public satisfaction with the way the NHS is run over time has reached a very, very high level. 60% of people now very or quite dissatisfied by it. Public dissatisfaction with NHS GP services, 62% dissatisfied. very dissatisfied with NHS dentistry services. That's up to nearly 60% as well. And public satisfaction with NHS accident and emergency service is up higher than 55%. So I'm afraid people are in despair about the NHS, and so we'll listen to your stories this morning, and we'll hear from more of you who have had cancelled appointments, rescheduled appointments, appointments that were made and then broken, because that is what is going on. So don't listen to anybody telling you that they're getting the waiting list down in the NHS, because they're not. They're just moving people around. It's like moving deck chairs around on the Titanic, quite frankly. It's 7:20.
He is wrong, and he's got the mood of the nation wrong on this. We want him at home more often, concentrating on our own domestic troubles, because he travels around the world trying to solve the problems of every other country, when he's not giving bits of the country away as he's foolishly doing with the Chagos Islands. So we need him back here to understand what it is like to be on a low income or a low pension, facing a water bill that's going up by more than a quarter, or facing an energy bill that's going up another 6 and a bit percent when it went up 1.2% in January anyway.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
7:23. Very good morning to you. It's a beautiful morning, by the way. Don't worry about the tariffs, OK? Just calm down. You know, stand by your beds. We'll see what goes on when it goes on. It's called Liberation Day. We're going to be talking to the Sun's business editor, who's going to explain it all to us as to what it could mean for this country. But there's an awful lot of doom and gloom out there about how the tariffs are going to ruin everything and the economy's going to absolutely collapse in on itself. Meanwhile, don't worry about that. We're getting warnings about wildfires, right? This one from Joanna in Salisbury says, wildfires? We're just getting over winter flooding, aren't we? And Phil says in Coventry, morning, Mike, mad Wednesday, wildfire. Should I just turn the news off? Will this make the world a much better place? Have a great day. Well, you can turn everybody else's news off, but don't turn off our news, because we are actually the place to be, the home of common sense. We will defenestrate everything for you, we will explain it all for you, and we will tell you exactly what is actually going on. This one from Marco, who says, great show, Mike. Mark from Swindon. I think the bin problem in Birmingham is getting so out of hand, they need to change the name of the city to Birmingham. I like that. That's very good. I'm going to bring you some news later on this morning as well about an out-of-control hawk which is just bizarre. Apparently dive bombing loads of people in a little village somewhere up in Bedfordshire. We'll bring you that in a moment. We're going to speak now, though, to Jeff Pogula, who's a reporter at Northwest Radio Seattle, because, of course, we are calling it, or Trump is calling it, Liberation Day. Trump expected to announce tariffs of up to 20% on all imports into the US, which is like to hit Britain's £60 billion worth of exports, because we've actually got a pretty healthy trade situation going on with the United States of America. They export a lot of stuff to us. We export a lot of stuff to them. Let's have a look at Caroline Leavitt. She is, of course, the White House press secretary. Here she is explaining what is going on.
Looking ahead to tomorrow, April 2nd, 2025, will go down as one of the most important days in modern American history. Our country has been one of the most open economies in the world, and we have the consumer base hands down, the best consumer base. But too many foreign countries have their markets closed to our exports. This is fundamentally unfair. The lack of reciprocity contributes to our large and persistent annual trade deficit that's gutted our industries and hollowed out key workforces. But those days of America, beginning tomorrow, being ripped off are over. American workers and businesses will be put first under President Trump, just as he promised on the campaign trail. The president's historic action tomorrow will improve American competitiveness in every area of industry, reduce our massive trade deficits, and ultimately protect our economic and national security. President Trump's economic vision is rooted in common sense.
Well, we like things that are rooted in common sense, as we are the home of common sense, of course. Let's talk to Jeff Pogula to find out what he makes of it all. Jeff, very good morning to you.
Morning. Good morning.
So, I mean, there's a lot of people here sort of getting worked up about this. Difficult to know precisely why they are, because, I mean, international trade is quite a complicated issue and it's quite a complicated subject, I think. But what are people in America saying about it?
Well, certainly it depends on whom you ask. You know, the Trump loyalists are going to buy what Donald Trump has to say, hook, line, and sinker, and the Trump opponents are going to reject what he has to say outright. But if you talk to most economists, they'll say that the tariffs that he has proposed thus far, what he's going to be proposing on the second notwithstanding, are likely to have a long-term negative effect on the American economy. Whether they have a greater overall effect on the global economy, something else to be said. But a protectionist trade holiday like we saw with Smoot-Hawley back in the 1920s didn't really work out for the United States back when we've tried it before. Obviously, things have changed in this century since then, so we'll have to see how things play out. But most economists here in the United States say it's ultimately going to drive up prices here for the American consumer when they're already dealing with rapid high inflation.
Yeah, I mean, prices are going up pretty fast there as it is, aren't they? What is the actual inflation rate there at the moment?
It's hard to say. We're expecting an additional report from the economic outlook coming up in the next few days or weeks. But I think it's hovering somewhere around 6 or 7% annually. I'm not 100% sure on that. You'll have to check my numbers.
Yeah, okay. But, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, people talk about pricing going up. They talk about, the immediate effect of tariffs. But, of course, I mean, when we saw the Mexico-Canada conversation, it was kind of backwards and forwards, wasn't it? You know, one minute it was a tariff going on, next minute the tariff was coming off, So there's a lot of volatility as well coming out of the White House in terms of sometimes Donald Trump says he's going to do something and then he kind of undoes it.
Well, the other word to put forward is uncertainty, and certainly the markets don't like uncertainty.
Yeah.
And so you saw the Dow with mixed results today, but overall on a downward trend for both the Dow and the NASDAQ, tech-heavy NASDAQ index here in the United States. If they knew what was going to happen, obviously that would send stocks and bonds and the trading market to new highs. But uncertainty is not something that the markets like, whether it's good or bad. So in that sense, in the short term, I'd say Donald Trump isn't quite playing it how he would like to necessarily play it, but how the markets react to what he has to say on the second remains to be seen.
Right. I mean, if you were to walk down Main Street, USA, and ask people, what goods they bought from foreign countries, like, for example, particularly Europe, they probably wouldn't know, would they?
Yeah, probably not, unless they drive a Volkswagen or a German-made automobile. But beyond that, most Americans don't pay attention to who buys or who manufactures what.
Yeah.
It's great to say, yes, we're going to buy made in the USA, but the typical American consumer, I don't think really pays that close attention. They just try to get the cheapest, or I shouldn't say necessarily the cheapest, but the best bang for their buck. They try to get the best value that there is. And I think that's rather a universal thing. I'm sure consumers in Britain do the same thing.
I think so, yeah. I mean, funnily enough, one of the things that used to always be a bugbear for me, because I spent a lot of time in the States, I lived there for 10 years, it used to really annoy me that British cars are actually cheaper in America than they are in Britain. I could never quite understand that.
Well, and certainly tariffs are something that's going to affect the automotive industry first and foremost, because that's something that Donald Trump has focused on in the last few weeks and months, and certainly through the 2024 campaign. Whether or not it really has a long-term positive effect, we'll have to see. But because even if you take a look at some of the American manufacturers, say Dodge, or Dodge is actually now owned by Daimler Chrysler, but say Ford, for example, a lot of their vehicles, while they say are American-made, use a lot of foreign parts and are actually manufactured in Canada or Mexico. They're not necessarily manufactured in the United States. Donald Trump wants to get all of those manufacturing jobs back in the United States. And while that's certainly a laudable goal, the dirty secret to that is it takes time. It takes a lot of capital for these companies to build up manufacturing plants in the United States. And then again, you also have the United States labor protections that you don't have, say, in Mexico or Canada. So ultimately, the cost of goods may end up going up in the long run. This is not something that economists are agreed upon, so I'm certainly not an expert to say what's going to happen next. So it's just wait and see at this point.
I think that's very much the case. It's a good thing. It's a good place to be, I think, waiting and seeing, particularly when Donald Trump's involved. Good to talk to you, Jeff. Thanks very much indeed. Jeff Pogula, a reporter at Northwest Radio, Seattle there, saying, look, the thing is, most people in America, like most people here, they don't really start looking at the country of origin. You get the kind of the mad lefties who go into a supermarket and go, oh, I'm only going to buy things that are made sustainably, and I'm only going to buy things that are made, in Britain, or I'm only going to buy things that are not made in Britain. I'm only going to buy things that are made in the EU, or something like that. Or, where is my avocado coming from? Well, most people don't care. Most people just buy the stuff that they want to buy, and hopefully, if it's not too expensive, they'll continue to buy it. If it goes up too much in price, it's called the law of supply and demand. You don't buy it if you can't afford it anymore. It's as simple as that. Let's get a voice note from Andy on tariffs.
Good morning, Mike. Andy in Southsea. On the tariff that America are putting on everyone, you are absolutely right. I really couldn't give a monkeys about it. I'm more concerned about being able to pay for my water bill, which has gone up, council tax, which has gone up, road tax, which is going up, and God knows whatever else. So, yeah, I couldn't give a fig about that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Keep on the great work, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking of buying a Cadillac, but unfortunately, now that Keir Starmer's put 20% tariff on it, I'm not going to get one. I mean, it's like, calm down. This from Malcolm. My stepson is having a gallbladder operation in 2 weeks' time at a private hospital on the NHS. Meanwhile, I've been waiting for a prostate appointment for 11 months. Yeah, that's about right. Anne in Yorkshire says, Mike, I'm waiting for a hospital appointment. I was due to attend in June, but they cancelled and changed my appointment 3 times, 3 days running via text. Then I got 3 letters on the same day. I then got a text asking if I was still attending my appointment. Absolute madness and a waste of money. Well, this is the thing, you see, and we're going to talk to Christian Niemitz about this in a minute from the Institute of Economic Affairs. People have lost faith in the NHS. Public faith in the NHS has pretty much collapsed. Satisfaction levels are at an all-time low. And it's partly because of the way that they're messing people around. And it's partly because of the way they're massaging the figures to try and make Wes Streeting look as if he's actually doing something, which is causing much of the problem. So I want to hear from all of you who have had an appointment cancelled recently, because that will feed further into what I believe is actually really going on inside of our National Health Service, which is less national and more local now, because depending on where you live, you get treated differently. It's a complete mess. 0344 499 1000, 7:33, back after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:35. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. You know what to do. You can send us a voice note, 0344 499 1000. You text us at 87222, start your message with the word talk. And you can find us, of course, on X at talkTV. Margaret says, I love the sunrise pictures you post, the rooftops of London, my favourite city. Margaret's in Birmingham, where, of course, the rats are getting bigger and as big as the piles of rubbish literally lining the streets. Mike, the doctor's got a massive pay rise and more money, and he's being shoveled into the NHS than ever before, says Stuart. Yet the satisfaction in the NHS is worse than ever before. Well done, Labour. Ian says, Mike, I have private healthcare and it's very good. It's how the NHS was 20 years ago. It handles less people because we pay for a second tier in addition to still paying national insurance. And Stuart from Bradford says on the NHS, I've been waiting 20 years for a spinal operation and now I have chronic sciatica. If it had been done earlier, I wouldn't be in the constant pain that I am now. Well, this is part of the problem. You know, the health of the nation very much depends on the health service of the nation doing its job. But according to a new satisfaction survey that's been put out this morning, published by the British Social Attitudes Research Department, people are not happy. People are not very, very enthused about even using the NHS. Let's talk to Christian Niemitz, Editorial Director at the Institute for Economic Affairs. Christian, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good to see you. Not surprising, this really, is it? A record 3 in 5 adults unhappy with the NHS, because it kind of has collapsed in on itself, hasn't it?
It has, yes. No, these figures are not surprising at all. And I'm guessing dissatisfaction with the NHS must have been there latently for quite some time. Yeah. It's just that for a long time we've had this social taboo. You were not supposed to criticize the NHS. But now it's not really surprising. So we pay more than ever. The spending is at record levels, the highest it's ever been, but we're not getting much in return. We have still more than 6 million people on a waiting list of some sort, and some of these people are in fact on multiple waiting lists, waiting for multiple treatments at the same time. So we now have a situation where, say, we pay for, it's the equivalent of paying for a business class flight with, say, Qatar Airways and then getting a Ryanair flight. Well, if the plane arrives at all.
Yeah, actually, I mean, if the NHS was run like Ryanair, it'd be a lot better, to be honest, because I mean, at least Ryanair is run as a proper business, and it's run on very strict economic lines. And if you can't do something because it's too expensive, you just don't do it. You know, and there's a lot to be said for that. Obviously, there are different ways of running health services, but it seems to me that one of the problems that the health service has got right now is just there's too many people in the country using it, and that's as a result of our burgeoning population.
Well, they've tried to cancel that out by also giving out a lot of medical visas. Staff numbers have been going up. It's just that at the same time, I don't know where all these extra staff members, where they're all going, what they're doing, because productivity figures are collapsing. We have more inputs than ever before, but somehow the number of procedures, number of operations is barely going up. So somehow there are more inputs than ever going into it, and nothing comes out of it.
Right. And one of the biggest problems, I think, as well, is that they've got one of the biggest sick lists of all time, because people are off sick in the NHS more than in any other business, I think, that is known in Britain. And that could well be, you know, a natural kind of situation, because obviously you're dealing with an awful lot of sick people, a lot of infections in hospitals, that kind of thing. But there's definitely a kind of a malaise about the numbers of people who are allowed to be off on long-term sick while still working for the NHS.
Yes, if you have if you have high rates of sickness absence in any kind of employer, that's usually a sign that employer is doing something wrong. This is a symptom of some workforce management problem usually, and this is one of the ironies, that the NHS seems to be a pretty bad employer, and that's also why it has problems with staff retention. Normally, the textbook model would say that if you have a national monopoly of, well, healthcare or anything, is probably going to be bad for consumers, but pretty good for the people working in it because they have a monopoly. Here we have a situation where even that isn't true, so it doesn't even seem to be great for the people working in it.
No, and I've been chasing a story sort of over the past 2 weeks really, and gaining a lot of information from people who are just letting me know what's happened to them, because I keep hearing from West Streeting that the waiting lists are going down, and I'm slightly suspicious, so I started sort of poking about, and it seems to me that an awful lot of people are getting appointments made for a procedure that they've been waiting quite a long time to get, and then suddenly at the last minute that appointment gets cancelled, and so they get sort of moved off the 18-week waiting list and start again. So it looks as though some of the waiting lists are being reduced, but in actual fact they're just sort of being shuffled.
Well, then you also probably have people who just don't bother going on to the waiting list because they think, well, this is I'm never going to get through anyway, and some people who just give up and drop out. So this is what happens generally with waiting lists, that if you think it's probably pointless anyway, you won't even bother trying. It's like, say, the waiting list for getting an Oasis ticket. Also, you probably know in advance, I'm not going to get anything, I won't even bother trying. Waiting lists become self-limiting above a certain level.
And certainly people's health then suffers as a general rule because they don't go to the doctor when they probably should. They wait until it gets a lot worse than when they can't ignore it anymore. Because, for example, one of the questions in this satisfaction survey, how satisfied are you with the time to get a GP appointment? 62% of people are dissatisfied with that. I mean, that is a really structural problem, isn't it?
Yes, and this is true across the board. So the main waiting list figures that are reported are for hospital appointments, for elective surgery, but it is a very similar story if we look at GP services, at accident and emergency. It is an across-the-board problem, and yes, of course, when people don't get treatment on time, then this can turn into a chronic condition. Or we also have the problem, we've had the figures recently that more working-age people than ever are now claiming disability benefits, incapacity benefits of some sort. Well, a lot of these people are probably stuck on some waiting list. And if you are the GP assessing them and they say, I'm waiting for treatment, well, it's probably the easiest thing that you can do is to say, well, you probably should apply for the benefit. Rather than
I mean, is it
get
possible,
your health sorted out.
I know that you guys can sometimes quantify these things. I mean, is it possible to put a financial figure on how much this dissatisfaction with the NHS is going to end up costing the economy, for example?
I'm sure that's possible. I haven't seen it yet, but there must be some estimates if we simply compare. On this issue that I've mentioned, more people relying on incapacity and disability benefits, and this is something where Britain is an outlier. So that this isn't happening in other OECD countries. In fact, it used to be slightly better here than the OECD average, and before the pandemic, and that situation has now reversed. So, and to the extent that you can attribute that to the NHS, then that would be a part of that cost of a dysfunctional health system.
I'm sure. And dysfunctional is certainly the word for it, I think. Christian, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Christian Niemitz there, editorial director at the IEA. The rest of the world needs to sell to the United States, says Matt. It's the biggest economy with the biggest purchasing power. And Jackie says, Rachel from accounts has another excuse now, as well as global events. Trump's tariffs will now be bandied about. And Vincent says, every day is April Fool's Day. Well, absolutely right. Let's get a voice note from Brian on Chagos.
Morning, Mike. Brian from Southend. On the Chagos Islands, I can't believe that Donald Trump has agreed that we can give it away and then pay rent on it, you know, and what I can't understand is how Starmer or one person has the right to just give away our sovereignty without any form of debate, vote or whatever. And surely the king has some say in it, you know. He's very quiet, and I'm beginning to wonder what he actually does now, Charles, because he seems to be letting this idiot ruin this country and ruin his legacy.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't seem to have much to say about very much, really. I mean, he's a bit woke, I'm afraid to say. He likes to talk about environment quite a lot. He was busy wishing everybody a happy Eid Mubarak the other day. And nobody's really entirely certain what Charles' agenda actually really is. I assume he has meetings regularly with the Prime Minister, and I'm sure that they probably see eye to eye on quite a lot of things, which is a bit depressing, to be honest. Coming up, we're going to be talking to Ian Duncan-Smith about the Chagos situation. But just before we do that, we've got some video here. I want to show you this because I spotted it last night on an ITV news report. It's a hawk, which is basically a rogue hawk. It's been attacking people in a village near Luton in Bedfordshire. There's a petition out now to save it because the residents are saying it's so dangerous, this hawk. It's so vicious that it attacks them every time they walk anywhere near it, that they want to have it killed, right? So, of course, it's a typical great British dilemma. What do you do with an out-of-control hawk? It's attacked up to 50 people. Check this out.
With attacks reportedly on the rise, what began as a rather amusing tale of harassment by a hawk isn't so funny for villagers anymore. We were filming with Jim Hewitt as he made his way to the shop this morning. Before there was a chance to warn him, the hawk swooped. It is one of the most serious incidents to date. Jim gave us permission to show the damage done to his head because he believes the bird has to go by any means necessary.
It's hard to believe, isn't it, in this day and age, you can't control a hawk. I mean, it's incredible. And this guy's covered in blood. You know, it's not, I mean, it's not funny, but it sort of is. It's a sort of British story, isn't it? A hawk terrorising a village. And, of course, nobody can decide what to do because you'll have the animal... There'll be all sorts of people up there soon. The Animal Welfare Brigade will be there. You know, there'll be people trying to catch it in a net. There's one guy walking around with a net trying to catch it. But it's out of control. Nobody can do it. They're very dangerous when they're, you know, angry. I don't know why he's so angry, this hawk. Maybe voted Conservative. I don't know. 7:46.
What's actually happened is we are trapped now in two competing elements. The first element is, if you look at energy, we now have the highest energy costs pretty much in the world. So no wonder industry has been shipping out from the UK. We have very little manufacturing industry left in the UK. Anything that uses high amounts of energy disappeared off. We're going to lose our data centers at the moment if we're not careful, because there's a huge amount of energy required to keep data centers cool, which is the key thing, and to power them up.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Just showed you some footage of a hawk there attacking people up near Luton. I'm not sure if it's got a name, this hawk, but it strikes me that we could be talking about this hawk for a while until something's actually done about it. But we've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning. You know, as we're waiting for the tariffs to hit, you know, you might as well cheer yourselves up with a few stories about being attacked by wildlife. So if you've got any, by all means, let us know. You can text us on 87222. You can leave us a voice note, actually. That would be great. 0344 499 1000. I'll tell you a story about my sister being attacked by a giant seabird. Coming up a little bit later on. Sir Ian Duncan-Smith is here, though, with very serious matters to talk about. Former Conservative Party leader, of course, and a man who's been talking about the Chagos Islands a lot recently. It looks as though, Sir Ian, a very good morning to you,
good morning.
That Donald Trump may be in favour of this deal, which I think came as a bit of a surprise to everybody.
Well, it's not really a case, I think, of whether we think he's in favour. The truth is the government has control over this because the government is, in fact, at the end of the day, were and are the owners of the islands.
Yeah.
And so what they've gone and done, of course, is they've presented a fait accompli to him, which says, basically, look, it's not going to cost you anything. We'll pick up any bill, and you'll still be able to use the airfield. We'll guarantee that.
Right.
That's almost certainly what they've gone and told him. And, of course, you know, if he's not going to have to pick up the bill and he can use the airfield, they've now got B-2s going in, of course, to the airfield there, which tells you that they could strike Iran from there. So it's a really, really, really strategically important location. But, you know, if the government says that, we don't know yet even one penny of how much it's going to cost us.
Right.
It talks about 90 billion to do this. All of this, we have no idea, and how quickly do those agreements fade with the Mauritians.
Yeah, and when you say it's sort of government owned, it's owned really by the nation, isn't it, Chagos? I mean, surely they shouldn't be allowed to sell off bits of what we supposedly claim to be part of our territory in any different part of the world. It's not really for them. You know, for me, I see them as very much the sort of football managers of a football club. The football club is owned by the people that live here, surely.
Yeah, no, the government, when I say the government owns it, it means that the government owns it on behalf of Britain and the British public. But the reality is that we didn't ever need to reach this point. Remind everybody that when the International Criminal Court was initiated, we already had an element in that before we signed up to say that nothing to do with the Commonwealth, relations between the UK and its Commonwealth, were justiciable in the court. And so what's happened is the court then was bullied into making a court statement after having apparently, quote unquote, reviewed all of the elements. And they came out and said the government should do this. Now, of course, they can't tell the government to do it. They cannot sanction them for not doing it because we have this codicil in the whole arrangement. And the reality is, therefore, we don't have to reach any agreement with Mauritius because Mauritius has never historically been the owners of the islands. We made Mauritius the administration point during the times, you know, when we changed the relationship between it. It had been done from Africa before that. So it was a British decision to make Mauritius the administrator. It's thousands of miles away from Mauritius. And the Chagosians don't even want to be part of Mauritius because Mauritians too often in the past had looked down their noses at the Chagosians anyway. So it's not really something that everybody wants to see happen.
No. Well, there's hardly anybody that wants to see it happen, really, apart from the International Court of Justice and Keir Starmer's government. I mean, I can't see, as you say, Donald Trump's probably been kind of led down the garden path and presented with a situation that he doesn't have to worry about, because he talked, I think, when they were in the White House Oval Office together, of, you know, it being a very good lease, a very strong lease. It looks like a good, you know, a good subject for us to get involved in. So, I mean, is there any sort of way that anybody can object to it in some way, shape or form?
Yeah, we the public can object to it, and we still don't know what the deal is. The government has hidden it from us. We also know that the Prime Minister was great friends with the barrister that was representing Mauritius, and actually, apparently, they've all met. So this looks very much to me like some kind of liberal stitch-up between all of the human rights lawyers over this one. And I think the main problem is that we have never been consulted. Parliament is meant to sign off on these treaties, and Parliament has never been consulted on this so far. They're now going to, apparently, I'm told, although we haven't had a public announcement, bring it forward. It'll go into what's called the CRAG process, which is the process that gets these things done it first goes to committee. So we may never see the money in it. The government says they'll tell us what the money is, but so far, absolutely nothing. Mauritians made it clear that they think they're going to get a whole shed load of money from the British government for something that they've never had any real direct involvement with at all. So it should have been much easier for us to let the Chagossians who are over here go back home, which we should never have kicked them out of, and say, look, here's some money to help you set up again. And in the meantime, we'll continue to administer this from London. But instead of that, we've decided to offload it. And right now, when you think you've got the Houthi bombing various parts of the Middle East, attacking Western targets, when you've got Iran has been behind the whole threat and attacks on Gaza, when you see that the potential tinderbox of the Middle East, this is strategically probably the most important asset that the UK government has, other than the sovereign bases in Cyprus, and, by the way, that the Americans use massively. So this is one of the biggest blunders that any government has ever managed to engineer, when you own a place and then you give it away to somebody else and then pay them to continue to use it. It's absolutely absurd.
And you haven't even mentioned China's interest in that part of the world as well. And China are a very huge and very looming problem there, aren't they?
Well, this covers the main trade routes east-west through the Indian Ocean. And therefore, strategically, China has its views to get there. They're quite close to the Mauritians at the moment. The real problem about this is that China is assiduous in making sure that they have this funding process for various countries called Belt and Road. And what they want to see is their ability to be able to choke off those trade routes at a drop of a hat. They already are wanting to invade Taiwan, which sits on the other end of the trade routes. People say it's because they want to make a point about Taiwan being part of China. Taiwan's never been part of China. Mainly, actually, they want it because there's a very serious deep water port on the western side of the island of Taiwan, and they can get their navy in there. They've got their navy now into Sri Lanka, where they defaulted on the port. China took it over, and they're basically running it now. And this would be another stepping stone to controlling the whole of that east-west trade route, which is hugely significant when you think that 72% of everything made in the world today is made in the area around Taiwan, etc., and shipped across those trade routes that run right past the Chagos Islands.
Right. It is extraordinary. So are you able to sort of hazard a guess as to when this deal will actually be done, if it is ever done?
Well, there was a whisper around yesterday that the government was about to announce that the deal had been done and that they were going to bring it in front of Parliament. But that's not been confirmed by any great major statement. The first thing they should do is put the damn agreement on the table with the money appended to it and tell us exactly what it is they plan to do with this agreement. But at the moment, nothing at all. They've kept it very quiet. They've talked, obviously. You know, they sent Peter Mandelson over there to sell this to the American government, and tell them that it's all going to be okay. And Trump's got, you know, I guess Trump's probably got 1,000 other things that he's concerned about. He's probably held the government to the reality that they have to keep this base there, that as long as the Americans can have their base there at Diego Garcia, then they don't mind. As long as the British continue to administer it, then they don't mind. But if there's any threat to it, America will not put up with this kind of agreement.
Yeah, it is a very bizarre situation indeed. Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, thank you very much for talking to us, former Conservative Party leader, of course, and a man who has indeed been put on a list by China as a sort of prescribed list of people who are not welcome to go there. It seems to me to be a very bizarre and very hurried deal that's been put together to sell off the Chagos Islands, but not to sell them, to give them away, which then costs us loads of money. Let's get a voice note from Kevin on the Hawk.
Morning, Mark. I've just seen that footage of that old fella getting attacked by that hawk. Who made that decision for the old guys who go, hey, I tell you what, go and stand underneath that telegraph pole, see that hawk, it's attacked 50 people, but you'll be all right. And then he gets swooped down on. Who made that decision? They should be in trouble, mate. Oh, come on. Oh, my days.
I mean, it's not what they call sort of a duty of care, is it, when you're filming a TV segment? This hawk has got a leash, says Ian, so it's not a wild hawk, it's a captive trained animal. Probably doesn't know how to hunt or feed with humans. And Sean in Warwickshire says, Mike, Keith Starmer should give the hawk asylum, put it up in a hotel. Why not, indeed? Why not give it some free money as well? Listen, we got more on the hawk. Esther McVeigh's coming up in the next hour as well. Keep it coming. This is Talk.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips, in Leeds it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us carry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12.60. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 8. The sun is up, ladies and gentlemen, and it looks like another beautiful day. Believe it or not, you will not be probably surprised to hear this in this day and age. And there's a wildfire warning going out by the Met Office, because apparently March was one of the sunniest Marches we've ever had since 1910, believe it or not. And so now they've decided that because the water is not really sitting down on the ground, we haven't had much rain for a while, basically it's a bit dry, we better send out a wildfire alert. I mean, for heaven's sake, what sort of a country are we living in? Meanwhile, everybody's getting their knickers in a twist about Donald Trump's tariffs. Liberation Day is what they're calling it over in America, where Donald Trump is going to impose what is likely to be, according to people who know these things, about a 20% tariff on everything coming into the USA from the UK and probably the rest of Europe as well. There's already a tariff on steel. There's now going to be a tariff on cars, unless there can be some kind of 11th-hour deal that Keir Starmer can sort out. Here's what Donald Trump has to say.
Tariffs are about making America rich again and making America great again, and it's happening, and it will happen rather quickly. There'll be a little disturbance, but we're okay with that. It won't be much.
A little disturbance. The bottom line is, of course, that most people don't care in this country. You're walking around this morning, you're probably thinking the price of petrol is maybe going to affect what I do and where I go this weekend. You're going to be thinking about the electricity bill that you've just got that's just gone up through the roof, the fact that your car tax has more or less doubled, the fact that you've already got problems paying your council tax because that's gone up as well. And in fact, you've got the water rates to pay now, which have gone up by 38 to 45%. So I think people have got more than enough to worry about without worrying about whether or not the next Cadillac they want to buy is going to cost them a bit more money. So I think it's all a bit of a shibboleth, if you pardon the expression. Esther McVeigh's coming up. She's the former Minister for Common Sense, so we'll get her view on all of it. Also, an awful lot of dissatisfaction around this morning with the NHS. An awful lot of you getting in touch to tell us about your experiences with the National Health Service, because for the first time now it looks as though not only can we talk about why the NHS is failing, but we can also now actually express the view that we're not satisfied any longer with the time it takes to get a GP's appointment, with the time it takes for the NHS NHS to actually see people, for the time it takes to get through the waiting list system, and for the time it takes to find an NHS dentist. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. Also, we'll be talking about many other things, including the migrant situation, the migrant of the day. It cost us £537,000 per Albanian migrant when we have to send them back because they've committed crime in this country. Deporting them costs over £500,000 each. We're talking about the Chagos Islands, of course, as well. Also, we've got Kemi Badenoch saying there's a big problem about free speech in this country. It needs to be fixed sooner rather than later. It's 5 minutes past 8. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. We're also looking for your stories today in the wake of an extraordinary clip that we've been showing you about a hawk attacking people up near Luton. It's a village of some hundred or so people. It's attacked 50 different people near Luton. Let's have another look at it. And this is from ITV last night. And Paul
Hewitt, as he made his way,
squeamish nature, because there's a bit of blood in this particular video. Have a look.
With attacks reportedly on the rise, what began as a rather amusing tale of harassment by a hawk isn't so funny for villagers anymore. We were filming with Jim Hewitt as he made his way to the shop this morning. Before there was a chance to warn him, the hawk swooped. It is one of the most serious incidents to date. Jim gave us permission to show the damage done to his head because he believes the bird has to go by any means necessary.
So, of course, being Britain, there's now a row about whether or not you can put the hawk down or whether or not the hawk needs to be somehow rescued and sort of put in a place, a safe haven for hawks. So I've been asking for your stories, basically. We've already collected a whole load of them. Damien, who sits behind the glass, has been attacked by an owl, apparently. I was telling a story earlier about my sister, who years ago was up in Scotland with my father, and they were wandering around the top of a cliff somewhere. It was either, I can't remember, it was one of the islands, one of the, you know, the Outer Hebrides or something. And this huge bird suddenly appeared. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a massive sort of seabird, like an albatross or something like that. And it had these huge feet, and it would basically land on your head and push you. And so it started attacking her and trying to push her off the cliff. And in the end, my dad had to sort of wrap a jacket around his arm and literally punch the thing every time it came in for another pass. And in the end, it turned out they were quite near the nest, and it was just protecting its young. But it's bizarre. So if you've got any stories like that, by all means, do tell them. This is from Paul on the NHS. He says, Mike, rate NHS appointments. I have a regular appointment for my cancer, and each single visit comprises 3 sections, blood, nurse, and then doctor. I now receive 3 separate appointments for the above process, 10 minutes apart. Is this how the NHS are offering more appointments? Well, that's very possible. Interesting. One from Ian, who says, morning, Mike, great show. Ian from Oldham. I had an appointment on the 23rd of December cancelled when I turned up for it. Remade for 10 a.m. on the 10th of April. Cancelled. Then remade for 4 p.m. on the same day. Cancelled. Then remade for the 23rd of April. We shall see. There's something going on, isn't there? I smell a rat. I do, honestly. And then I suggested earlier that maybe if it was run a bit more like Ryanair, it might be a better run system. But Ian in York disagrees. He says, Mike, the NHS being run like Ryanair. Can you imagine? Right, we've booked you in. Do you want a local anaesthetic or full anaesthetic? That will cost you an extra 150 quid. Will you want us to stitch you up when the surgery is done? Cotton thread or surgical thread, that will be £20 or £85. Yeah, that would work. I think it would. I mean, it actually would work better than it does now, because it doesn't work now. That's the point. And we know that from this dissatisfaction survey that's been done. Esther McVeigh is here, former Minister for Common Sense. Esther, very good morning to you.
Yes, well, you talked about the sun this morning. I'm literally being blinded by the sun. I used to think that you are the sunbeam of the airwaves, so you're coming straight into us here now, hard and fast.
Yeah, but of course, you know, not only are you full of the joys of spring, literally, we're now being warned that there might be a wildfire, so you better keep your eyes peeled just in case,
well,
you know, a bit of a tinderbox out there.
What a load of bunkum. Everybody wants to be catastrophise everything.
I know.
Instead of enjoying the fact that we've got a bit of sun, I could put my sunglasses on for this interview here. We have to catastrophise it. We've all got to be a victim. We can't enjoy the moment. Just enjoy.
I know. Well, I feel a bit like that about this tariff story, you know, because there's an awful lot of very serious sort of chin-stroking going on in studios all around the country, you know, with people saying, oh, it's going to ruin Britain, it's going to ruin the world's economy, Trump's a dangerous man. You know, most people, I think, don't really understand understand tariffs. I mean, certainly, you know, international trade is quite a complicated thing, and certainly we've been putting tariffs on goods coming from America for a long time. So surely this is all about a bit of toing and froing of different countries sort of setting out their own stall, isn't it?
Look, Trump made very clear when he came into office, I'm going to make America great again.
Yeah.
He was looking at jobs. He was looking at tax reductions for his citizens. This is what he said he was going to do. We've seen how he sort of postures. We've seen how he peacocks. And I don't think he's looking for protectionism.
Right.
I think he's saying, I need now a balance of trade. We've been open. We've allowed your goods to come in. But you know what? You're not doing, you know, reciprocity for us, and that's what I'm looking to do. So long as it's not protectionism, so long as he's looking at people being open and free trade working, then I think it's a good thing. At the moment, I think people think it's protectionism and there's going to be a tariff war, which is exactly what we don't want.
Right. I mean, the idea that Ursula von der Leyen is going to say that she's going to retaliate to Donald Trump is laughable, isn't it, really? Because, for example, as he points out, they've got £350 billion dollar trade deficit with Europe because people in Europe don't tend to buy American cars, but an awful lot of European cars, for example, get sent to the US. So there's not really much she can do to retaliate, I don't think.
Yeah, no, and I think you've got to look at Trump's end goals. His end goals are jobs, manufacturing, as I said, reducing taxes. And let's look at that vision. And unfortunately, Europe and Keir Starmer don't have that vision. Keir Starmer is doing the exact opposite here. Instead of wanting to reduce taxes, he's hiking taxes.
Yes.
Instead of looking at his manufacturing base and looking at businesses, he's not. They're now going abroad, closing, shutting down, reducing the size because of these taxes. And I think Starmer would be best to look at how you make Britain great again.
Yes.
And that's what he should be doing, because that spring budget was a disaster. We also now think, oh my goodness, Rachel Reeves could have lost her headroom already. And it's because they're not thinking long term.
Right.
It's like we're going from one disaster to another. Starmer, instead of being a human rights lawyer, needs to be a little bit more like a businessman and say, OK, let's make Britain the best it can possibly be.
But that's the problem, isn't it? They haven't really got any business experience. They haven't got any nous. They don't really have anybody that is anywhere around them who's ever run a business. They have no business advisors. They've got Jonathan Reynolds. You know, the closest he came to a business was pretending to be a solicitor. You know, he couldn't even get that right, you know?
Exactly. And you look at what they've introduced, and we all know the horrors that are starting in April, awful April, from the rise in the employer's national insurance contribution. You've also got the workers' rights on the way. What people might not know that happened in Parliament yesterday is now this alignment of regulations with Europe, which means regulations are going to get greater, which is going to be another imposition on businesses. Also this week, Europe, Starmer is hoping to link in again with the trading, the EU emissions trading scheme of Europe. Again, more red tape and bureaucracy strangling our businesses. So as I said, Starmer, take a leaf out of Trump's book and let's make Britain great again.
Yes, unfortunately, though, they're punishing people who are entrepreneurs in this country. They're punishing the sort of wealth makers, if you like, many of whom are leaving the country. And instead they say that they're supporting ordinary working people by raising the minimum wage, which is all well and good. But at the end of the day, what's the cost of that to the rest of the economy?
Yeah, I think you had something like last year, 10,800 millionaires, centimillionaires and 12 billionaires left the country, taking their money, their jobs, their prospects and their opportunities. We need to keep those people here. And if Starmer can't wake up to that fact, what are we doing wrong that is pushing our brightest and best out the country? Then he shouldn't be leading this country. And we're saying that now. What is it? His approval ratings, Labour's approval ratings are absolutely tanking because he's taking the country in the wrong direction.
Yeah, 68% disapproval apparently now, which is the highest it's ever been. And also an interesting stat this week, I thought, which it turns out that Keir Starmer has been the worst performing Prime Minister of all time when it comes to stopping the small boats.
Well, you see, he sees everything through the eyes of a human rights lawyer. and he's not taking the strong actions that are needed. He'll never want to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. He'll never want to get rid of the Human Rights Act, because that is what he lives and breathes and totally believes in. And those are the key things we've got to get out of, to say we've got, to stop these boats. And I'm afraid so long as he's got lungs and a nose, he is not going to take the steps required to stop this immigration, both legal and illegal.
Absolutely right. And one final one for you, Esther. A piece in the Mail today that Kemi Badenoch saying free speech in Britain is at risk. She's basically agreeing with J.D. Vance and people in the United States who say, there is a serious issue around free speech. We saw the couple in Hertfordshire being arrested by 6 police officers who turned up at their door because of some things they'd said in an email to a school. We've got this woman who's called Livia Tosigi-Bolt with a handwritten sign outside an abortion clinic who's being, roughed up and chased around because she's apparently in a buffer zone. There's a lot of concern about free speech in this country, and it's one thing, I think, if she was to attack Keir Starmer on Prime Minister's questions, he can't get away from that and say, oh, well, we inherited this, because they didn't.
No, I mean, for parents to just pass a comment on WhatsApp that they didn't agree with the recruitment process in their daughter's primary school, and to have 6 police officers come round, people would say that is a police state. What is that all about? They were just questioning the recruitment process. So it's stopping free speech, but it's probably allowing a kind of speech that they agree with. So if that person on WhatsApp had have enforced the recruitment process, said it was terrific and not questioned it at all, no police would have been around. So this distortion of what can be said and what can't be said should alarm everyone. And we are seeing this happening now. We are seeing these rights and liberties curtailed. You cannot say, what left-leaning government doesn't like, and that's what it's boiling down to. And I think that's a particularly scary place to be. And if that's because Keir Starmer doesn't want to be challenged on anything, and at this moment he should be challenged on everything as he's taking this country in the wrong direction. We absolutely need free speech, because we need to challenge this government every step of the way.
Yeah, absolutely right. Esther, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Esther McVeigh there, in the sunshine, former Minister for Common Sense. We're all in the sunshine today because it looks like it's going to be a lovely day. We're going to go to the phones now, though. We've got a lot of really interesting things coming in on the Hawk front. But Michael's in Barnsley, wants to tell us a story about the NHS and his daughter. Michael, very good morning to you.
Hi, I love watching your show, Mike.
Thank you.
Absolutely amazing. The weekends, I think, wow, where's he gone?
Yeah, well, I have to get some rest sometime, but there we are. What can you tell me, Michael? What's your story?
My daughter, just over 2 years ago, was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. And so the doctors gave her medication, and then they would lower it, they would higher it, they would lower it to try and get some kind of a balance. So 2 years ago, they decided to go. She needed an appointment to the hospital. She got an appointment a week before she was due to go. They cancelled it. So she had to be referred again back to the doctors, who then sent her back to the consultants, who sent her another appointment too, then cancelled it and said she would get a voice call. When she didn't get one, she rang the hospital and they said that she'd been taken off the list. So she went back to the doctors, back to the hospital, got an appointment, cancelled it, kept cancelling it. This went on for nearly 2 years.
Goodness me.
About 8 months ago, she started to lose her voice.
Right.
Couldn't speak properly. So she went to the hospital, eventually got an appointment, and they said that it's too late, the damage is actually done to her throat. It should have been dealt with earlier, but nobody wanted to take responsibility.
That's shocking.
So they gave her an appointment to learn how to speak again properly.
Right.
My daughter is 45 years old, bless her.
Okay.
So she went to the hospital, and this young nurse gave her a straw with a glass of water and asked her to put the straw in the water and try and sing Happy Birthday. My daughter said, "Are you joking?"
Right.
And so she just walked out of the hospital.
Yeah. That's what an appalling story. 2 years of cancelled appointments and promises that were just not kept. Absolutely incredible. And is she now unable to speak?
She can speak, but it's kind of quite rough, and she gets very out of breath when she's speaking.
Right.
So sometimes when she's talking to me, if she's more than a few minutes, she will say, "Dad, I need to go now because my voice is hurting and I'm losing my voice."
Goodness
Which
me.
is quite sad, really. It
Poor
breaks
woman.
my heart to feel like this.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely awful.
The NHS are horrendous, Mike. This was at the Barnsley Hospital.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrendous.
Awful.
Yeah, and can I just say another thing, Mike, about the GPs?
Yeah, go on.
I can never, ever get an appointment at 8 o'clock in the morning.
No.
This morning, I waited watching my phone, and it got... as soon as it changed to 8 o'clock, I started ringing.
Yeah.
And it was engaged.
Yeah.
And I thought, it's impossible.
Yeah.
I eventually got through at 8:05, and they said, we have no appointments. I said, but you've only been open 5 minutes.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
I was fifth in the queue. How can you have no appointments? Try ringing at 10 o'clock. You ring at 10 o'clock, Mike, you might as well forget it, because they'll just say, well, you have to ring in the morning.
I mean, just ridiculous, isn't it? They're just not doing their jobs, are they? It's unbelievable. Listen, Michael, really good to speak to you. Thank you very much for that story. And also, he's absolutely right about the satisfaction levels in the NHS for getting an appointment with a GP at an all-time low, of course, as well. Because why wouldn't they be? You know, how can they be full up after 5 minutes, as he says? Let's get a voice note from Mark on the Hawk.
Morning, Mike. It's Mark in Lancashire. What a fantastic thing to be attacked by a hawk. Jim in the village looked like Burt Lancaster in the Vikings movie with his eye missing and a scarred face. Must be the most exciting thing to happen in that village for years. Brilliant.
I mean, I'm sure he wouldn't share your view on that because he's covered in blood. Anyway, listen, some great stories coming in. This one from Anthony in Selby. He says, morning, Mike. When I was serving in the Falklands, I was swooped on by a large bird known as a cara or Johnny Rook. I was in the sand dunes where apparently they nest, so I may have been getting too close to the nest. Those claws meant I needed 8 stitches, and I've still got the scar 35 years later. Goodness me. I don't know what they're going to do about this hawk, but a lot of people saying it's obviously a trained hawk because it's got some kind of tethering around its feet, which would suggest that many people saying, one from Sean, he says a falconer could catch that pretty easily because it's been tamed at some point. It's got jesses on its legs, he says, so it might have got lost while being flown. Yeah, maybe. But it's certainly not a very happy hawk, that's for sure. It keeps attacking people. Anyway, we'll keep you updated. Keep bringing us these stories of encounters with wildlife, because they could be quite interesting and quite amusing. 8:22.
Beckham had said to her in bed in Madrid in the hotel that she was the first time he'd ever been unfaithful, the first time he'd ever committed adultery. Well, at that very moment, a News of the World journalist was in Australia interviewing another woman who'd had a 2-year affair with Beckham. And the journalist tried to get, for confirmation, the woman to call Beckham, but he had his phone turned off the whole time because he was in bed with Rebecca. So...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 26 minutes past 8. Clayton in Dartford says Burt Lancaster wasn't in the Vikings, that was Kirk Douglas, who was attacked by Tony Curtis's hawk. OK then, if you say so. Let's get a voice note from Darren.
Good morning, Mike. It's Darren here from Carmarthen. Just on the Hawk story, Mike, I've actually taken the liberty just now of phoning Paul Gascoigne, Gaza, and he's heading down to the town in question at the moment with 6 cans of Stella, Mike, and a fishing rod, and he's going to spend some time with the Hawk and try and talk him round. So fingers crossed for that one, Mike. Have a good day.
Yeah, OK. Sorry. Oh, there's always something that gets you going, isn't it? The Hawk's doing it today. It's up in Luton. If you're anywhere near it, don't go anywhere near it because he's going to attack you. Let's talk to Noah Hoffman, who's here from The Sun. Noah, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Sorry, I'm slightly in hysterics laughing at this story about the Hawk up in Luton, but I'm sure the tariff story is far more important, so I'll try and be serious for a minute. Ashley Armstrong's got a big piece, page 10 of The Sun today, basically saying whether Trump's tariffs will thump the UK economy. It's a difficult one, this, isn't it? Nobody really knows what he's going to say or what he's going to do, and if he does do something, whether that's going to last forever. But what are the things that are likely to go up in price, I suppose, would be the first question to ask you. If in fact, you've done quite a good list on the page there. What should people be looking out to not buy if he puts tariffs on?
So the industries that will be most impacted by Trump's so-called World Liberation Day, or what is here being dubbed as World Tariff Day, are luxury cars. So in particular, Rolls-Royce and Aston Martin cars that we export to America.
Yeah.
Scotch whiskey, Mike, that might be one that you enjoy, and also some cheese as well. Who doesn't love a whiskey and some cheese? I know I can't afford a Rolls Royce, so that's more likely to impact me.
Right.
And then also Scottish salmon and some luxury clothes as well. So it is actually more of the high-end products. But of course, all of these effects trickle down and impact other areas where people will feel the hit in their pocket.
Yeah, because I suppose the argument would be if you're making Scotch in Scotland and it's going to cost you more money, or you're going to have to charge more money for the Scotch in America, maybe you're going to start charging more money here as well.
Yes, exactly. Or so what could happen is they end up selling products that were destined for America in the UK.
Right.
But ultimately, what is going to affect prices and what is going to make this big move from Trump hit people's pockets is that it will really be detrimental to growth. And so I'm sure your listeners heard about all these cuts to disability benefits that Rachel Reeves announced at the spring statement. And she really risked a massive rebellion off the back of those cuts, even though arguably they were quite positive. That was all to create this £10 billion pound fiscal cushion for the Treasury. These tariffs would wipe that out completely. So it would kill growth, it would wipe out fiscal headroom, and ultimately that means more tax rises for us.
Yeah, and it's more bad news really for Rachel Reeves, isn't it? Because even saying that was supposed to create a reasonable amount of sort of wiggle room, if you like, for want of a better word. The welfare reforms that they've announced, according to the Times this morning, likely to actually result in 400,000 more people being signed off as unfit for work, because people who are going to have the the lower sort of disability allowance taken away are going to try and apply for the higher one.
Yeah, that's right. So that was a sort of key detail that was hidden in the government's PRs. Around this announcement. And it is interesting because the Treasury has not done any modelling as to what impact this will have in terms of moving people into work. But so how many people will this actually encourage into getting a job? But what they have figured out is how many people will try and use the system's higher tier of disability benefits to ensure that they don't need to go to work. So that was a key detail that they left out.
Yeah, it really was. And that is the trouble, isn't it, with an awful lot of the sort of manoeuvrings that Rachel Reeves has done. A lot of the, you know, like the tax they want to take off farmers hasn't really hit yet. The tax that they want to take off the winter fuel allowance hasn't really provided them with an awful lot of money. The VAT tax rate hasn't really actually worked out as well as it ought to have done. So an awful lot of the sort of fiscal decisions that have been made so far in the first sort of 10 months of this government haven't really produced much in the way of cash.
Completely, and that's why I think we'll see a lot of pressure piling on the Chancellor from all corners of the Labour Party. The Tories are having a great time with it. Reform, obviously, as well, will be first to highlight that despite all of these measures announced in the spring statement and in the autumn budget, despite all of the promises from Labour that they're going to be this party of growth, that growth is the number one of KISS 500 missions, there's seemingly a new one every day. We actually haven't seen any growth, and the OECD, actually, the big economic think tank, downgraded growth prospects for the UK this year to just 0.1%. Now, if these Trumps come into play tomorrow at 0.01, that could even be wiped out, which means we are completely stagnant and no one is going to feel better off. And come polling day at the general election, Labour will really feel the impact of that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. No, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Noah Hoffman there from The Sun, talking about the big piece on page 10 this morning. Ashley Armstrong, the business editor, has written about what British exports could be affected going to the USA. Things like Kurt Geiger handbags, Stilton cheese, Jaguar Land Rover, smoked salmon, Aston Martin cars, Scotch whisky, all of that sort of thing. But whether or not that hits people in the pocket here in the UK sort of remains to be seen. They're calling it Liberation Day over in America. We'll find out later on, of course, what exactly that's going to mean. Got this from Mark in Gloucester. He says, why don't we all nickname the hawk Rachel, as it keeps attacking ordinary people? That's quite good. Sean in Warwickshire says, I'd forgotten the time a seagull flew into the toilet windows when my nan was in the toilet in Brixham. She nearly had a heart attack, and it took both my father and grandfather ages to catch it and get rid of it. They're nasty things and not what you want to join you when having your morning ablutions. No, very true. I've got a seagull story as well, actually, which I think I've told before, but I'll tell it again. Tony's in Bournemouth. Tony, very good morning to you.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. Do you remember Morris Minor?
I do remember Morris Minors. Did it have the indicator that came out the side of the car, like an arrow?
That's right. It's sort of humpback shape.
Yes, yeah.
Jelly mould.
I don't think I'd fancy being near a rhino in one of them.
No, anyway, we were there, and this rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, believe it, Dad, just put your foot down, Dad, we're in a field. Put your foot down. This rhino was chasing us, right? Now, looking back...
No, wheels on a Morris Minor are not really suitable for a field either, are they?
No. But anyway, looking back, I don't at the time, but this thing was either trying to... Because rhinos have got very, very poor eyesight, but they've got very good sense of smell.
Okay.
And remember, this Morris Minor was a grey humpback.
Yes.
Looking back, he was either trying to beat us up or mate with us.
Right. Do you think it was another rhino?
We didn't fancy hanging around to find out which.
And they're quite quick once they get going, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. They thunder after you. They are. They're big things.
And did your dad manage to get away in the end then?
Yeah. Well, we're still here. So.
Well, true. That's fair enough. Stupid question, really.
But it would have destroyed a Morris Minor. Totally destroyed it.
Yeah. Well, then, I mean, if you hit a person in a Morris Minor, you'd probably destroy the car. But listen, great story. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. Tony from Bournemouth. I've been asking you for your stories about wildlife. I was once mugged by a seagull. which I'll tell you about later on. 8:34. Chris says this: as a retired firefighter, the wildfires that happen every year are not a natural phenomenon. Farmers burn off dead grass on the moorlands to add new growth of grass for their sheep to graze on. It's happened for hundreds of years. The farmers know exactly when to burn, when the winds are strong and the sun has dried the grass. Fires occur. Then there's a copycat behaviour with idiots fighting fires. It's largely illegal. With idiots lighting fires. It's largely illegal in the UK. Later in the year, natural fires are far more likely. Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely right. But the idea the Met Office has put out a wildfire warning today seems to me to be completely and utterly bonkers. Doolally. Crazy. It's 8:35. Coming up, we'll talk some more about free speech.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:36. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. 4 glorious hours every single weekday morning. Prime Minister's questions coming up after 12 today with Julie Hartley-Brewer. You'll be hearing what he's got to say for himself, old Keir Starmer. Mark in Selby says, Mike, very sad to hear of the passing of Val Kilmer. I thought he had died some time ago. His performance in Top Gun was too good. And when will the Met Office give out a tsunami or volcano alert? They must be itching to do that. They must be. Let's get a voice note from Andrew.
Oh, hello, Mike. On the subject of getting attacked by different animals, etc., I live in Southsea, and once I was sat on the seafront with a girl I was dating at the time, eating fish and chips. Some mahoosive seagull swooped down and nicked my fish and made off with it. I mean, that's going back about 30 years, so the fish and chips then probably only cost me about £1.50. So if it had been today, I'd be facing financial ruin, I think, after that one.
You absolutely would. They do that all the time down in Hastings, by the way. And you see all these tourists in the middle of summer coming and sitting, and they've got cafes there with fish and chip shops, and they've got seats outside, and they always want to sit outside. And within about 5 seconds of them sitting down, there's a seagull literally on the table, either nicking chips or nicking fish or just generally making nuisance of itself. It's not good. Let's talk to Rob Hosking, though, former frontline police officer, because one of the big stories that we've been covering, of course, in the last few days here is the case of Maxie Allen and Rosalind Levine, held by the police for 8 hours after being arrested because of a number of complaints that they'd made about their daughter's school on WhatsApp groups and also by email. Hertfordshire's Chief Constable came out yesterday and actually defended the force arresting the two parents, saying, with the benefit of hindsight, we could have achieved the same ends perhaps in a different way. But he didn't say they shouldn't have been arrested. He said maybe we should have just sent more plainclothes police instead of sending 6 uniformed officers. People were quite incredulous at that. Let's see what Rob thinks. Rob, very good morning to you.
Morning, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, we weren't expecting Andy Prophet to double down on this, really. We were sort of expecting him to say, we made a bit of a blunder here. We probably went a bit far. Instead of which he went, no. We could have done it a bit differently, but we still should have arrested them.
I know, to be honest with you, when I read it, I couldn't believe what he was saying, to be honest, because, when we look at what they've done, come on, when we look at arresting people, is it in public interest and for public safety?
Yeah.
You cannot tell me those two things are met by arresting them and holding them in a cell for 8 hours.
Right.
And for him, the mistake was made initially. Then for him to come out and double down on it, I think it's really poor.
It's
but
bizarre,
then
isn't it?
one minute he says he defends it, and then the next minute he says, well, we could have done it differently. So are you defending them? Are you not defending them? Yes, you still think they should have been arrested, but if you still think they should have been arrested the way they were, then I think you need to think again.
I think, he needs to sort of re-examine what it is that the police are doing in Hertfordshire, because one of the reasons he said that they had to have so many police officers was because they wanted to seize electronic devices, right? And apparently you can't do that unless you're arresting people. But, I mean, at the end of the day, why do you need to seize electronic devices if you've already seen whatever the complaint was about the emails that were sent and the WhatsApp group notes that were there? Why do you need to seize the electronic devices anyway?
Obviously, for an evidential point of view, seizing those devices would give them the best evidence. Even though they've already got the evidence from somebody else, seizing the device will give them that evidence. But I completely agree, there's other ways to do it. You don't need to arrest people and put them in custody to seize their devices.
Right.
And this, all this could have easily been done with a voluntary interview. And I know they say, well, we didn't think that they were going to cooperate with that. Well, ask them first.
Right.
Give them that opportunity. And when we think about arresting people, this is in the heat of the moment. These, arrests should be happening in the heat of the moment when things are ongoing. You cannot tell me that the best possible solution for this kind of thing is to arrest 2 individuals in the way they've done it and then to hold them in a cell for 8 hours when, you're taking people's liberties away for something so... I'm not saying what they've done is good, but my point is there's a lot worse out there that's happening that we should be focusing on and putting resources on.
Well, that's obviously the criticism that's going to come in, isn't it? Because clearly there are plenty of police forces, whether Hertfordshire's one of them, who are not particularly good at performing when it comes to making, cases against burglars, against rapists, against, serial offenders. We've got a lot of respect for the police in many ways in this country, but the way they seem to be being run, locally particularly, is they've got their priorities all wrong.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think common sense has went out the window, if I'm honest with you. I think when you look at some of the decisions they make, someone with common sense should be saying, hold on a second, why do we need to do this? Yes, it may be lawful, but just because it's lawful doesn't mean that you have to do it. And for nobody to come out and say, maybe there's another course of action to do here.
Yeah.
I just think it's alarming, and I think it shows the state of the police forces probably across the UK, where common sense is probably something that doesn't really exist anymore.
Exactly. And I mean, the sinister side of it, I suppose, if you want to go down that road, is Kemi Badenoch's come out and said that she's a bit worried about free speech in this country because no matter what, no matter even how rude it was, and we've interviewed the guy involved in this, Maxie Allen, because he works at Times Radio here in the same building as us. We interviewed him the other day, and he said, look, we went all the way back through all the messages. We tried to find the worst thing that we said, and none of it was particularly rude. I mean, the worst thing they said was that I think one of the teachers was a control freak or something like that. It's hardly, actionable and criminal to say something like that. But there is a sense from a lot of people's point of view that the police are kind of now working on behalf of the state to try and make out that there are things that you can't say.
Well, I think the fact that there was no further action after a 5-week investigation, I think shows that...
I mean, how did they take 5 weeks, by the way?
Honestly, I was thinking that too when I read it. I was like, how does it take you 5 weeks to come up with that decision? So it just, everything's poor. Everything's poor with what they've done here. Yeah. And then we go back to the free speech element. At the end of the day, they've clearly not done something significantly wrong enough that they haven't been charged and convicted of it. So it screams like something's going on in the background with free speech where you think, where's the line? Where's the line between abuse? Where's the line between free speech? Yeah. And this is getting blurred and more blurred as the Labour government are in power. Yeah. We need something to come out. Like, well, what is free speech then? What are we allowed to do and what are we not allowed to do? And at the end of the day, this is also on a private WhatsApp message group. So it makes it even worse. So
Absolutely.
I just everything about it I just think it's not good. It's not good in sight.
And I've got, as we speak, a piece of breaking news about the police, funnily enough, Rob. Let me run it past you. The Metropolitan Police will have to lose 1,700 officers, PCSOs and staff, and cut a number of services as it faces a £260 million hole in its budget for the coming year, according to the force today. The Royal Parks Police team will go, as will officers placed in schools. And at the end of last year, the Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, warned of eye-watering cuts which could see the loss of 2,300 officers. So they're going to lose around about 2,000 officers by the looks of it. That's not going to help, is it?
No, not in the slightest. At the end of the day, I think the police forces across the UK are suffering in two parts. A, lack of numbers, and B, lack of common sense. So cutting more numbers isn't going to be helping things, and the public don't feel safe anymore. I've spoken to so many people about this, and they do not see the police officers on the street they used to do, and they used to see. And when we don't see that, we're not feeling safe. When we see police officers not using common sense, then of course you're not going to feel safe too. It's a scary situation we're living in, and with more cuts being announced too, they're not doing an incredible job at the minute. Never mind when you're going to cut that too. So what's it going to look like going forward?
I know.
I fear about that.
I do too. Rob, good to talk to you. Rob Hosking there, former frontline police officer, sharing my incredulity that the boss of Hertfordshire Police actually thought they did the right thing. He said maybe we could have done it slightly differently, but not arrested them. He said, oh, yeah, we should still have arrested them. One from Mark here in Derby. He says, great show, Matt. Here's my animal attack story. I went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor. Scary creatures, goats. Yeah, you've got to be careful with goats. You've got to always be very careful. They like butting people and are very good at it as well. And how about this from... have we got Andrew? Is that a new one? It's not a new one. Here's one from somebody who doesn't give a name, I don't think. Do I get it? Oh, no, it's Barbara, sorry, in Aylesbury. When my children were small, we got attacked by a kestrel every time we went into the garden. We rang the animal hospital, local to us, and the owner came out with a bag of dead chicks and managed to entice him and capture him. He took him back to the hospital and found that he had been kept as a pet and couldn't fend for himself, so he could never be released. He eventually played the part of Kez on the London stage, and our family appeared in the book eventually written about him. Well, there you go. I remember Kez. That was a great movie, actually, very, very long time ago. One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. As an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime, the folk in this village need to use the old Aussie trick to stop being swooped. You have to wear an ice cream tub on your head with eyes drawn on the back so they think you're watching them. True story. Funny enough, down in Hampshire, Vanessa, in our makeup department, is just telling me the exact same story, that they have these magpies in Australia. She's Australian, and people paint eyes on them, and so they don't attack them. But she knows somebody for whom the eyes didn't work. They got attacked anyway. So, you've got to be very careful. Here's a voice note from Carl on tariffs.
Hi, Mike. Carl in Bury. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think it's absolutely fantastic they're slapping all these tariffs on us. And the last thing I want is Keir Starmer to get any help whatsoever, and I'll take 4 years of pain just to get rid of the guy. Cheers, pal.
Carl, let's hope you don't have to have 4 years of pain, but I think that's the trouble. People are more concerned about what Keir Starmer's going to do to this country than what any tariffs that Donald Trump's going to bring in is going to damage this country. Let's have a look at the Hawk video, because the people who haven't seen it yet, if you're just joining us, it's coming up to very nearly 10 minutes to 9. There's a hawk which is attacking people up in a village near Luton, Bedfordshire. There's a petition out now to save it after residents thought the council was considering putting it down. And a statement from the Flamstead Parish Council vehemently denies that they are planning to euthanise the bird. But I tell you what, this bird is dangerous, right? Because you'll see in a moment in this clip from ITV News that there's a bit of blood involved, and if you're going anywhere near this hawk, it's basically going to dive bomb you. So apologies if any of you are a little bit squeamish, but here we go.
With attacks reportedly on the rise, what began as a rather amusing tale of harassment by a hawk isn't so funny for villagers anymore. We were filming with Jim Hewitt as he made his way to the shop this morning. Before there was a chance to warn him, the hawk swooped. It is one of the most serious incidents to date. Jim gave us permission to show the damage done to his head because he believes the bird has to go by any means necessary.
It's pretty grim, that, isn't it? Looks dreadful. Absolutely awful. Anyway, we'll be back after this.
A lot of young people who in the past would have gone to the left have shifted to the right in places like the Netherlands. And therefore, precisely because there's this earthquake that has erupted, you have an attempt to basically find new instruments to keep things the way they are. And I think she has become the victim of what we're seeing throughout Europe, of this attempt to hold the line by the old political establishment, by the European Commission, but they basically want to ensure that change is minimized.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:52. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Of course, Julie Hartler-Brewer will be here then. Mike in Sussex says, Mike, the Chagos Island deal equals reparations in disguise. I reckon Labour would do it to other UK overseas territories if it could. Absolutely disgraceful. Let's get a voice note from Patty on the Metropolitan Police cutting numbers.
Morning, Mike. Hearing that the police have got to lose a lot of their force because of the money, I think really instead of losing policemen, although that might help us because there won't be so many to arrest people for their tweets and posts and emails. But instead of losing policemen, why don't they just get rid of the DEI guys that Talk found through freedom of information that they're spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on. Anyway, great show. Patty from Causden. Thank you.
Patty, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, good idea. Get rid of the people that don't actually do any policing. That would make sense, wouldn't it? Let's talk about a very strange story that's been on our minds for the last couple of days. We're joined by Juliana Cruz-Lima. Juliana, good to see you.
Good to see you.
You're a foreign news reporter at The Sun. This is a story that's got more questions than answers, really. It's about Prince Andrew's former friend, Virginia Giuffre. I guess that's how we can describe her. The woman who accused him of having sex with her when she was underage. She made a settlement with him. She popped up in was it in New Zealand or Australia?
Western Australia.
Western Australia, with an Instagram post saying that she'd been in a car crash and she only had 4 days left to live. And ever since then, the story's kind of unravelled, hasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. We've been getting new lines as the day went on yesterday.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's still very much fresh. We don't have much confirmation apart from her own statement. The police says otherwise. So we're still in, I think, the initial stages. I think we might be hearing a lot more on this story.
Right. So we don't yet know what she was doing in Australia, but she said, one of the things she said was she wanted to see her children before she dies. Presumably they're not with her then.
Yeah, so from what we understand, she has a home in Western Australia,
Right.
and it was in the north of Perth.
Right.
That's where she got into this collision with a bus driver.
Right.
From what we understand, according to her, she's in a serious condition, in hospital, 4 days to live, according to her own words and own post. But then the police said that the collision was filed just the day after. She's still, like, there were no major injuries reported. So we're hearing two different things from two different people.
Yes. And of course, one of the versions that I've heard is that after the initial crash, which, as you say, wasn't thought to be involving any serious injuries, she went home.
Yes.
The bus driver had a bus full of school kids, so he went back to the school. He reported it later that night. She then woke up at home, decided that her injuries had got worse, and she then went to hospital.
That's what we understand from her own statement.
Yeah.
So it's exactly what you just said. The collision happened. The bus driver said, I have all these kids with me. I got to go back and take them back to school. I'm going to file a report on this later. Meanwhile, she goes home allegedly battered and bruised, as we've seen on that post later on.
Right.
And then, according to the statement by her own family, the injuries got worse allegedly, and then she was taken to hospital. So that's what we know at the moment.
That's what we know. And she's now saying that the post that she put out on Instagram was a mistake.
Exactly.
Because it was meant to be posted privately on her Facebook page. But, I mean, I only know this because it happens to me. If you post something on Facebook, if it's linked, it can sometimes come out on Instagram.
Yeah.
And presumably, I mean, I don't know anyone that has a private Facebook... I mean, everybody's got a private Facebook page, I guess, until you publish it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
But then it's not really private anyway.
Yeah.
It's a very strange story, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to wait and see what's going to unfold in these next coming days.
Right.
But a very, very bizarre story indeed.
And are the authorities concerned about whether or not she's just making it all up, or what?
I wouldn't say the authorities, but Prince Andrew's ex, Lady Victoria Hervey, she definitely has a lot to say in the last few days.
She's been quite critical, hasn't she?
Yeah, so she was very much criticized for reposting a picture of Virginia injured with the word karma slapped across it, and to the sound of the final countdown.
Wow.
So that was very much criticized. And yesterday, apparently, she told the Daily Mail that she was doubling down on these claims, saying that she doesn't believe that these injuries are that bad. So a lot of people are having a lot to say. But again, we're going to have to see how all of this unfolds.
Very strange. I mean, we've seen some strange stories over the years, but this one, definitely one of them. Good to see you. Thank you very much indeed, Juliana there, Cruz Lima from The Sun. Let's take a quick call just before we head to the top of the news at 9 o'clock. Carol is in Cornwall. She's got a story about a tarantula.
Yes, Mike.
Morning.
Good morning. As a child, I lived in Mexico with my parents. My father was an engineer, and one morning when we lived in Mexico City, but we used to travel around the countryside as well. And I suddenly woke up. I was 8 years old. I woke up, but I didn't know why I had woken up, and it just was starting to get light. And we had no air conditioning, so all I had on was a pair of pants and a sheet thrown over the bed, which was not tucked in.
Right.
And I felt, after a while, I knew I was awake for a reason, but I didn't know why. I felt a tugging at the bottom of the bed.
Oy.
And I knew it wasn't a snake because it was not heavy enough.
Right.
And anyhow, to cut a long story short, a tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. Now, my sheet was tucked in under my armpit.
Yeah. Were you sort of frozen at this point?
I didn't move, obviously.
No.
And so it was walking all the way up. You could feel it prickly. You know, it was as big as a man's fist. It was also very, very beautiful.
Right.
It had orange knees, and it was beautiful, but terrifying.
Were you frightened?
Yes and no. I think something kicks in when something like that happens.
Yeah.
And so it walked all the way up, and I can remember thinking, so now my chin is on my chest, and this tarantula is right in front of me. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? What am I going to do? But then a miracle happened. It raised its two front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Wow.
And it never actually touched my skin.
Because when they raise their front legs like that, doesn't that mean they're about to bite you, normally?
I have no idea. What we think happened was it noticed the change in what it was standing on.
Right.
The sheet was ruckled up, and then it was going to be something different, and the animal knew that.
Yeah, blimey. Crikey, listen, it's a fantastic story. Carol, got to go. I mean, what a thing to happen when you're 8 years old, face to face with a tarantula. Crikey, goodness me. There's going to be more tales from the unknown coming up in the next hour. This is Talk.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips in Leeds, it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Keeping it real.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It is coming up to 3 minutes past 9, and this is the final hour of the show, of course. We've already done 3 hours already. It's 4 glorious hours every single weekday morning of Morning Glory, the home of common sense, the headquarters, if you like, of the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. It's commonly known today as Liberation Day. Yesterday was April Fool's Day. I don't know whether anybody fooled you, but we've been fooled consistently by this government, I have to say. Now it's Liberation Day. This is the day when Donald Trump basically announces later on this afternoon, our time, or possibly early this evening, what Trump tariffs he's going to be putting on various goods coming into the United States of America from the UK, from Europe. There's a chance that a 20% tariff could affect things like the car market, Bentleys, Jaguar Land Rover, Aston Martins, all that sort of thing, Lotus cars, very expensive high-end cars, smoked salmon going over there from Scotland, whiskey as well, and of course cheese, all sorts of high-end products, as they would be known, which are bought in billions and billions billions and billions of dollars by the US audience, of course. Whether or not that has much of an effect on this country, nobody seems very sure. But the people who hate Donald Trump, of course, are saying he's going to wreck the economy. Well, don't worry, Rachel Reeves has already done that. There's no need to worry. We'll talk about it all the way through the course of this hour. Kevin Hollingwake's going to join us, Shadow Business Secretary. But I think an awful lot of people are getting worked up for no good reason at the moment. Until we know what it is that he's doing, there's not much point in getting particularly worried. We've also been talking about an incredible story that we came across up in a little village just outside of Luton, where a hawk has been attacking as many as 50 people in a village there. There's a petition now to save it after residents are worried that a local parish council is going to euthanise the bird. Apparently there's going to be all manner of people no doubt turning up, animal rights types trying to protect it, other people trying to kill it. It doesn't seem very happy, whatever it is, and as soon as he sees a human, he basically just goes for them. It's absolutely extraordinary. So we've been getting some good stories from you guys about all of that. The breaking news this morning as well, Metropolitan Police are going to have to get rid of 1,700 officers. They're going to shut down the Parks Police Department altogether. They're going to get rid of PCSOs. They've got a £260 million black hole in their budget, apparently, and they have to get rid of people, which is hardly going to help the crime situation in this country, is it? So once again, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have managed to kibosh safety, managed to kibosh anything that is likely to make this country a better place, and rather they're turning into a worse place. NHS satisfaction levels at an all-time low as well. We'll be talking about that. Plus the French have finally admitted that they must do more to stop migrants coming to this country. Well, thank you very much indeed. A bon voyage to you. It's 9:05. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. This from Lynn in the West Midlands. She says, "Morning, Mike. My 16-year-old grandson is in the middle of an A-level mock exam, and guess what? His school is doing no lessons at all, but they're having an identity day so that they can all go to school dressed as to what identity they identify as. Surely schools are there to teach, not push identity issues on our youngsters. I truly despair. But I love your show." And Andy from the Wirral says, "I was attacked by a couple of geese. I was a sales rep at the time and my customer was a farmer. As I walked onto the farm, these two mad geese charged at me with wings flapping and honking like crazy. I held up my briefcase to fend them off and everything spilled out. Much more effective than a guard dog." They really are. Well, they used to, in sort of Middle Ages, they used to use geese all the time to protect castles and all sorts, because they didn't really have guard dogs at that time. Jane says, "Send the hawk up to Birmingham to catch the rats." Yeah, well, good idea. We could kill two birds with one stone, as it were. Let's talk to Kevin Hollingwake, Shadow Business Secretary. He's down in Westminster for us, in College Green. Kevin, a very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Thanks very much for joining us. I guess we should talk about the tariffs, but I've been sort of basically saying this morning, look, most ordinary people walking around on the streets of Britain are not going to know the ins and outs of international trade development or international trade deals. But what does it mean for this economy, and what does it mean for Rachel Reeves if Donald Trump puts these tariffs on later on today?
Well, the potential consequences are very significant. Tens of thousands of jobs potentially in areas like automotive and other areas you outlined earlier. But I tend to agree with you, actually, that this storm will pass. And I think Goldman Sachs has said the impact in the UK economy, even if these tariffs are levied longer term, will only be 0.1% of our economy, of GDP. And in the context of what Rachel Reeves is doing, she's hit the economy by 1% of GDP already. That's tenfold impact compared to what these tariffs could do. So, I've got great confidence in the UK businesses and consumers to carry on regardless. I have zero confidence in Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer how to manage the domestic economy, which is far the most important part of the whole equation.
Well, this is the thing. People saying, Donald Trump's going to wreck the world's economy, he's going to wreck the markets, he's going to wreck Britain's economy. Well, Rachel Reeves has gone quite a good way to doing that already, hasn't she?
Quite, exactly. She spent 6 months talking the economy down, which business wants confidence, and it needs certainty. And she destroyed both those things by talking the economy down, then hit it with £70 billion of tax and spend, including £25 billion of business taxes, all of which end up with consumers and workers, of course. So, and now they've got coming down the track this ridiculous employment rights bill, which will cost jobs, reduce salary increases, and it'll push prices up. All those things are bad for the economy. So she can't do much about what she's done already, but what they could do is scrap that legislation, because this will be deeply damaging for UK business, UK PLC, and most importantly for our consumers.
Well, that's right. And also, with every kind of move that they make, it seems to make things worse rather than better. I mean, we saw this morning in the Times a story that said their welfare reform is likely to result in 400,000 more people actually being signed off unfit for work. So it's kind of the opposite of what they were attempting to do. And this morning we hear that the Metropolitan Police are having to lose 1,700 officers off their staff because they've got some kind of £260 million hole in their budget. Well, that's hardly going to make the streets safer, which is what they've been telling us they're going to do.
Well, this is the point. I mean, Labour were talked very tough in opposition, but they're very weak in government. And that's whether you're looking at welfare reform, or whether you're talking about negotiations with Donald Trump, or whether you're talking about immigration, of course. And you're seeing immigration rise to all-time high levels in terms of illegal immigration over the Channel. 31% increase year on year. And that's because they scrapped the provisions we'd put in place through the Rwanda scheme. Because you need a deterrent. That's the point of the Rwanda scheme. They never let it work. They scrapped it before it took effect. So, say, tough in opposition, very weak in government, and this country needs a strong hand at the tiller right now, not this weak, limp hand of Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves and Angela Rayner.
No. Well, because government approval rating is at an all-time low, isn't it? We saw just this week that that Keir Starmer is now currently the worst-performing Prime Minister of all time when it comes to stopping the small boats coming into this country, and he's only been in charge for 9 months. Meanwhile, public's disapproval of the government is reached 68%.
Well, listen, we made some mistakes in government. I could list all the good things we did, but we made some mistakes. Now, I'm not saying we didn't deserve to lose the last election. I think we did. But also, the country does not deserve this Labour government. It is... People think that things, you know, it could be worse than the Conservatives in government. It's an awful lot worse. And so, you know, this really, they've got what Keir Starmer's got to do. He's got another 4 years in office, probably, sadly. They've got to turn the ship around. They've got to do some things that are going to have a positive effect on the economy, on immigration, on the safety of our streets, all those things that are really important to people. And everything they seem to do is making things worse. So, you know, we want them to succeed, this government. This isn't about us just winning the next election. We want this country to be run as well as possible for the next 4 years. We do keep presenting the alternative, telling where they're going wrong on education, telling them where they're going wrong in the justice system, all these things, telling them where they're going wrong in Birmingham, where they've created this catastrophic mess, this national embarrassment of the streets, resembling the streets of the 1970s with all this uncollected rubbish, which is purely as a consequence of the Labour Council's actions in Birmingham. And the Minister admitted this on the floor of the House this week. And the reality is, people have got to go out and vote on May the 1st for their local council. If you vote Labour, you get trash. Vote Conservative, you'll get decent councillors who will do a decent job of cleaning up your communities.
I mean, the trouble with that situation in Birmingham, it seems to me, that there's a sort of intransigence going on. There's people now picketing the offices of the council where the lorries go in and out, because I think they were trying to remove some of the bins and some of the rubbish by hiring sort of, you know, private agency workers, but they're not now able to go out of the picket line because the picket line is sort of blocking them from doing so. And it seems as though, I spoke to the Unite Union about it this week, and they said, look, it's not about the money, it's about what they're asking us to do for less money, basically. It's not about them asking for more money. They're being asked to do work which is not what they're willing to accept to do. So it seems as though somebody needs to get in the middle of it and sort it out.
Exactly. And that's got to be Angela Rayner. It's her job, and she's refusing to do so. No. And I think she's refusing to do so because the Labour Party gets tens of millions of pounds from Unite the Union, who the Birmingham Council are trying to negotiate with. And Rachel Reeves herself, Angela Rayner herself, got £10,000 in terms of a donation towards her own personal election campaign.
Yeah.
I think she's frightened to get involved because of the conflict she's got. They've got to get in there. These workers actually have not been, their salaries have not been cut. They've been offered equivalent roles on exactly the same salary in other areas of the council, other areas of work in the council. They should accept that and get on with cleaning up the streets. That's what they should be doing, rather than preventing those agency workers stepping in and cleaning up the mess. But the person who's really got to step in is Angela Rayner. She can't hide away from this. She didn't come to the House this week. We tabled an urgent question. They did a statement instead of that, but then they had no answers. They're basically leaving it to the local council bosses to try and sort this mess out, despite admitting that this is all a consequence of their flawed deal with the Unite Union back in 2017. This leadership in Birmingham cannot solve this problem. What needs to happen is the government, Angela Rayner, needs to step in and sort this out. That's her job. She's got to do it.
And the government yesterday were caught out again, weren't they, by Robert Jenrick? We're going to play a little clip here of when he was talking about the sentencing panel, the sentencing review panel, and what happened yesterday when they suspended their new guidelines.
After he has brought the Sentencing Council into total disrepute, can she honestly say at the dispatch box that she has confidence in the head of the Sentencing Council, Lord Justice Davis? Yes or no? And if she does, is she aware that yesterday he took to the airways in an astonishing departure from the expected standards of judicial conduct to advocate for abolishing short sentences, especially for hyper-prolific offenders, effectively instructing lower courts to follow suit? It's time for him to go, and if she won't sack him for this, what would it take?
Yeah, I mean, Shabana Mahmood's made a real dog's breakfast of this whole business of the sentencing review, hasn't she?
I can believe hash of it, and Rob Jennings done a great job in holding it to account, and I think he's absolutely right. The head of the Sentencing Council should go. It's outrageous that the courts, or some people within the legal system, think they can set policy for what's there behind me, Westminster. That's where laws are made. Yeah. Should be the rule of law, not the rule of lawyers. So we make the laws, and the court should oversee those rules and, of course, interpret them. But they're not there to make policy. That's the critical difference here, and it's absolutely outrageous. But again, what the government's got to do, it's got to be strong. It's got to go in there and be willing to take these forces on. It cannot be the case that our courts think they are higher than the most important place in the land, which is Parliament, because that's where the laws are set in the first place. So, and clearly she's not got a handle on this. At the moment, those sentencing guidelines are merely paused. So it may well be, and I think this is what Rob Jenrick was saying yesterday, that some courts are still effectively using them as some kind of guidelines for their judgments, which has got to be wrong. We do not want a two-tier system in this country.
We certainly don't. We seem to have a two-tier system in all sorts of different ways. Kevin, good to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed. Kevin Hollenrake, the Shadow Business Secretary, just breaking the news there to him. The Metropolitan Police are going to lose 1,700 officers, PCSOs and staff because they're facing a £260 million hole in the budget. Well, how is that going to make the streets safer? I don't think it is it? Let's get a note from Andy.
I've had two encounters. One encounter was me and my mate, we come out of a pub. It was outside Bangkok. There was no street lighting outside Bangkok at the time. And then we're so pickled trying to find our way back to where me and my mate were staying in the hotel. We heard this big whoosh around us. And then when we moved closer, it was an elephant with his trunk. Someone parked an elephant like a horse. We were shocked and we soon ran away.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's not the sort of thing you don't notice, though, is it? You must have been pie-eyed. What's that thing over there? I don't know. It's an elephant. Really? This from Dean. He says, a strange story. In short, while on holiday in Mexico, I saw what I thought was a ghost in a hotel in the middle of the night. I struggled to sleep after that, and after tossing and turning, the bed sheets were messy, so I turned the light on to sort them out. At that point, my wife shouted, ouch! She looked under the sheets, and there was a scorpion in our bed that had stung her thumb. That's from Dean in Solihull. Yeah. Well, of course, lots of you have got things to say about the summits and the state of Keir Starmer's government. Terry in Birmingham says, Mike, Starmer has had more summits than the Himalayas. Let's have one on police and the attack on free speech. As for losing cops, get rid of all the assistants, deputy assistants and deputy assistant roles. I think that's a very good idea. Would certainly be a good start, wouldn't it? Coming up, we're going to speak later on to Simon Calder about the Heathrow Airport debacle of last Friday because the power outage CEO is at a select committee session coming up a little bit later on in this hour. Also, Errol Musk is going to join us, Elon's dad. We'll see what he has to say about the tariffs and about Teslas being attacked all over the place.
Well, I think we're going back really to the budgets in October of last year when this ludicrous £22 billion black hole was discussed. Much of it was the creation of the Chancellor herself by offering, I think it was a 9.8% increase to a lot of public sector workers who probably deserved it. But I just didn't like the way it was done.
I'm just never quite sure how much we need to pay train drivers to come to work, personally.
Well, I think they're out of it at 60 grand or 70,000 pounds a year.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 21 minutes past 9, here with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course, when Julie Hartley-Brewer will join us. On the NHS appointment system, I've got this. Mike, my husband had 5 separate letters posted and arrived on the same day for an appointment. 3 days later, he had 5 separate letters arriving on the same day, cancelling them. He couldn't make it up. Incredible. And Mick in Wallington says on the police cuts they don't need all the ranks they've got. Only 3 assist the public: constable, sergeant and inspector. They do not need chief inspectors, chief superintendents, deputy assistant commissioners. This is where the cuts should be. Yeah, indeed. And Reg says this: Mike, if we've got to get rid of police officers, can't we just get rid of the ones that are drunk and coked off their heads? Just a thought. Yeah, we had that story just the other day, didn't we? And this one from Fred, who's in Surrey. He says, Mike, they even handcuffed him behind his back. This is ridiculous. It was a passive arrest, low risk, and if he needed to be arrested, it should have been front stack. Way over the top. I'm a retired officer and I'm just at a loss as to what's going on, and I can tell you I would not have arrested. That would be my decision, as with every other officer. Well, a couple of police officers have been getting in touch about the case in Hertfordshire there, where the parents were arrested because supposedly they had interfered with their own children's education and sent a few unhappy emails and made a few displeasing comments on WhatsApp groups. Unbelievable stuff. As we were telling you, Thomas Wolby, the chief executive at Heathrow Airport, is appearing right now before the Transport Committee. Let's dip in and see what's going on there.
This is first and foremost, a safety situation. We need to make sure when a crisis happens that people are safe, and that is the first priority. that we also set out to secure, i.e. that no one is caught in lifts or elevators, that no one has gotten hurt, that no one have been electrocuted, that our systems are working. What we could see was that our systems were not working, particularly in the area of Terminal 2 and the tunnel into our central terminal area were affected. That area also housed airport-wide systems, which were also powering down as we were losing power. Our safety resilient systems, so the systems that power our safety critical operations like the runway lights, the tower, they all switch in as they should in the airport. But for all other functions, so the operationally critically systems, for that we rely on power from partners with whom we have resilient contracts or contracts for resilient power setups. What we then decided, when we had asserted the situation and started setting up our objectives for how we would solve this crisis, which is standard operating procedure that we do that, we set up the first objective to be back in operation by Saturday morning, normal opening at 04:30 in the morning. The second objective was to be back in operation before that. Now, this is, of course, after we have secured the safety of staff at the airport, secured the safety of environment, and secured the safety of our assets and our borders. So after that, what are we setting out to solve? And that was to be back in operation by 0400 next morning, considering the severity of the incident. And considering, I think it's very important, the uncertainty that we were in for a very long time. We did not know exactly what was happening. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the fire was still blazing. The fire services had not started extinguishing the fire, I believe, but I hope we can get more information on that. So we simply didn't know when we would get that third inlet up and running again. There was no information on that.
That's the Chief Executive Officer of Heathrow Airport speaking there, Thomas Waldeby, who's Danish, of course. He used to run the airport in Copenhagen, which is slightly smaller than Heathrow, you'd have to say. He's appearing before the Transport Select Committee, where he's giving them his version of events as to what happened and why things happened in the way that they did. Remember, he's the same guy who, when he came out and gave an interview for the first time after the electrical power outage that happened last Friday, he basically said that he was very proud of the way that the airport had recovered, which a lot of people thought was a little bit insensitive, given that so many people were at disadvantage, so many people were stuck around the world, because a lot of people thought, despite the size of the fire and the intensity of the fire, which was off-site, it wasn't on Heathrow Airport's actual land, it was down the road, people who lived in the area had their electricity supply refixed and reconnected within 2 hours. Less than an hour and a half of time did they spend without electricity. So Heathrow had electricity in parts of it. They had in Terminal 3 and Terminal 5, they did have electricity, and yet a decision was taken to shut down the entire airport, which some people think might have been a little bit premature. A couple more of you have got things to say on Donald Trump and the tariffs, of course. I can see Uncle Donald has just handed Rachel from Customer Complaints a lifeline, says Batman, as she will, along with Comrade Keith Starlin, blame all the UK economic woes on external factors, yet again. Well, of course they will. And one from Mark in Selby. Mike, all Labour needs to do to succeed and make Britain great again is to write down on a flip chart all their future plans on one page, then on another page the exact opposite to those plans. Then they can throw away the page with their plans and use the page with the exact opposite ones and use that as a manifesto. They have not got one thing right to date, after all. I think that's really what troubles an awful lot of people. They literally haven't got anything right. You know, who can forget Keir Starmer wandering around making out that he's, you know, Captain America and he's going to, you know, get a coalition of the willing together to put some troops on the ground in Ukraine. Who could forget him going to the Donald Trump White House and getting the little letter out of his pocket and going, I've got a letter for you from the King. He wants you to open it now. Well, that didn't do any good, because now we're about to be hit by some tariffs by Donald Trump, which he was hoping wouldn't happen. And who could forget as well the way that they decided that it would be a great idea to have all manner of people to come and invest in Britain, only to completely and utterly ignore some of the biggest investors in the entire world, including, of course, Elon Musk. They didn't ask him to come and join in because they don't like him and they don't agree with him. You can't say that, though, because you might upset Donald Trump. Let's get a voice note from Dave on the Hawk.
Good morning, Mike. Great show. That hawk that's attacked that guy has got a jessie hanging on its leg, a leash or a jessie. So it is a falconry bird. Somebody must be missing that bird because that's not a normal hawk, a wild hawk.
Yeah.
Anyway, great show. Dave from Kent here, and keep on keeping on, mate. Lovely.
Dave from Kent, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I mean, the hawk's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because it would appear, and that's more pictures of the damage it can do. I mean, terrible carnage up there in a little village outside of Luton. With all this wokery, says Mark, I wouldn't be surprised if they leave the poor hawk alone and just supply local residents with helmets to protect themselves. Yeah, that wouldn't be surprising, would it? He says, loving the show. Absolutely right. And one from Mary, she says, I work in 2 NHS hospitals. I have a colleague who has gone off sick for months in the last 3 years. When her pay is about to be halved, she miraculously comes back to work. If this was a private hospital, she would have been sacked years ago. Well, that is one of the problems, isn't it? We've got much more to do. Kinsey Schofield's going to be talking to us soon. Also, we're going to be finding out from Simon Calder what the latest situation is, not just at Heathrow, but around the world in general on the travel front, because it's getting close to Easter holidays. And if you are going away anywhere, you want to try and make sure that you're not going to get stuck, for heaven's sake. And don't forget, not only do we preview all the greatest entertainment and news that you can have, we also give you a chance to win some tickets to Oasis. How do you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Got this from Mike in Ains, who says, we have a violent bird who attacks us on occasion where we live. We've nicknamed it Steven Seagull. Yeah, very good. Thanks for that. It's 9:30. Simon Calder coming next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:33, very nearly. We're with you all the way through until 10, of course. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be along. Then we had a really interesting story from Carol earlier on about a tarantula. Michelle says, I'm loving Carol's story. I've been keeping tarantulas for years, and it sounds like it was just out for a wander. They don't tend to attack humans, unlike hawks. I hope they rescue the antisocial bird. I think it's great. I'm laughing my socks off. Yeah, well, absolutely right. Somebody who isn't doing that is somebody who calls themselves Peed Off in Yorkshire. My husband gets a £150 rise in his wage packet this month. Yay, oh yay. But our bills and rent have gone up over 200. So we're still worse off. Yeah, well, I think that's where a lot of people are going to be saying, because it's all very well Rachel Reeves telling us that she's making working people, well, better off by giving them a rise in the minimum wage. Unfortunately, it's all being offset by the rise in council tax, the rise in energy bills, the rise in your gas bill, the rise in your water rates, the rise in prices at the supermarket, and generally speaking, just the rise of everything right now, which is going on. We're going to speak to Simon Calder now, travel correspondent, nay, a guru of The Independent, because we've just been watching the Transport Committee down at Westminster questioning Thomas Waldeby, the Chief Executive at Heathrow Airport. Also speaking is Nigel Wicking, who's Chief Executive at Heathrow Airline Operators Committee. Let's have a look at what he's had to say for himself.
89% of its schedule. We have 50 extra flights coming in. Airlines were upgauging the aircraft, increasing the size of the aircraft, just to minimise the impact on the passengers. And the view is that by Sunday, we'd cleared the backlog of passengers.
I mean, there's a lot of supplementaries that I think people want to ask, but I do want to let Alice and Eliane answer the introductory question. So, Alice.
Thank you. And again, you know, this is a very rare and significant event, and we are very sorry for the disruption that was caused, very significant level of disruption. I thought it might be helpful if I just briefly set out the different roles. There's an analogy that often gets used with the roadways, so you can think about the transmission network, which I run.
This is apparently Alice Delahunty, who's president of the Electricity Transmission Department of the National Grid. I would say they didn't transmit the electricity very well, so you're out. Thank you. I think we'll talk to Simon Calder instead. Simon, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Just on the list of things which are going up, don't forget passports go up next week. So if you're obviously before the 25th of November, I calculate you will be quids in by renewing now. So yes. I would urge you to do that. But meanwhile, yeah, very interesting start to proceedings. I've been listening, you can hear it rumbling away in the background there. Yeah. I've been listening to Thomas Waldeby saying we were in a very uncertain situation for many, many hours. 1/3 of the airport was powering down. That's really critical because that suggests that 2/3 of the airport wasn't powering down. And whereupon, you're thinking, so you diverted 120 flights with, 25,000 people on, even though you could have landed them and then taken them through Terminal 5 or Terminal 3, which still had power. So we're getting into the gist of that. He said it would have been disastrous to open the airport to people because there were all sorts of problems. Traffic lights weren't working, and they would have got tens of thousands of people just turning up on the off chance. Instead, they just said, go away, we don't want you till tomorrow. Although they then changed their mind on that as well. So I'm looking forward to the MPs getting their teeth into this. Ruth Cadbury, the chair of the Transport Select Committee, has already given him a bit of a ticking off because he was reading out his homework.
Yes.
Anyway, interesting times. Yes,
indeed. Because the trouble is that, you know, as I said at the time, you know, it would appear that they took that decision because I think you might remember, I don't know if I told you this on the Friday, but we had a call from somebody who lived literally down the road from where the fire was going on. And he said, you know, he lived close enough to it to actually can feel the heat coming off it. And he was talking to us, obviously, in the morning of Friday, some hours after the fire was still burning, I think. And he said, I said, how's the power situation? He said, oh, yeah, we only had our power knocked out for about an hour and we got it back at about 1:30 in the morning. So I was thinking to myself, well, hang on a minute. Well, if the street where the fire is has got power back, you know, why is Heathrow shut?
Well, and Thomas Waldeby kind of sought to answer that by saying, look, we had to reroute the power to get all the electricity we needed. And that's a very complicated process, he said. It takes about 10 hours to do that. because you have to power things down, then you have to power them up, then you have to check them and everything. Bluntly, he's sticking to the line. I talked to him the day after this appalling shutdown, and he's sticking to the line, which was dangerous. Therefore, we had literally no choice but to close. So we're very sorry, but there you are. One of those things.
Yes.
But,
well, he might be very sorry soon, because, as I suspect you might think as well, there could be some people coming after him for some damages, because certainly some of the airlines will have lost a bucket load of money. And when we see this morning in The Sun, an exclusive by Nick Parker, Ryanair is suing the air traffic control systems because they didn't fix their air traffic control systems soon enough when they went down. I think it was last summer. They're going after them for £5 million.
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, that's entirely up to them. I'm looking forward to covering that particular case. But yeah, the damage to Heathrow was actually far, far more than that miserable day. I calculate the airlines lost about £100 million. That's in lost revenue and in care costs. Actually, Ryanair was one of the beneficiaries. Last week, the boss Michael O'Leary said they made £200,000 flying British Airways passengers around. Generally, the airlines are very, very cheesed off. And, of course, massive damage to inbound tourism and to the reputation of the UK, as well as the emotional harm of 250,000 people suddenly finding their travel plans have been torn up.
Absolutely right. And the other thing that I think people should and will think about, perhaps they'll ask the question at the select committee, is why is it that Heathrow Airport, with such a mammoth, sort of structure, it's described as almost like being a small town in and of itself. Why does it not have its own power supply, which is not just a backup power supply, but actually a proper, honest to goodness generating plant like the plant in Hayes that went on fire, but actually inside the airport perimeter, which is run by them?
Sure, yeah, and the answer to that is that some airports, indeed, around the world do have their own power stations, but Heathrow just says, we haven't got enough space. We have this ridiculously small footprint in West London, completely surrounding. We haven't got room to put that in, so sorry. We have lots and lots of systems, and we're now seeing we will, as the morning plays out, the blame game, the finger pointing between Heathrow and National Grid and SSE, which does the local grid, as to whose fault it was and what electricity was available where. Just an utter mess. And these things keep happening. Mike, I'm going to get some T-shirts made. You can have the first one, which will say, stranded at Stansted 2023 after the air traffic control failure, and 24 hours at Heathrow for the latest meltdown. It's just an awful situation for so many people, and it makes us look utterly ridiculous.
Well, it does. And I don't know if I mentioned this to you last time we spoke on that Friday, but I was stuck in that one in America a few years back when the whole of the sort of eastern seaboard got knocked out by a power outage from a huge generating plant up in Niagara, and it knocked out all of the airports in the tri-state area. And I was at Newark, literally waiting to get on a continental flight back to Glasgow, and everything was off. There was no air conditioning, all the doors were locked open, there was nothing on the screens. But it took about 5 hours, but they managed to get all the international planes off and get them out on the runway, because they had emergency generators to run the runways. The one thing that did strike me was they had everybody literally running through security. So, I mean, if you had been in any way a nefarious character, that would have been the time to do something, because they didn't have time. They were just like, just get to the gate, just go. And they just were absolutely brilliant at actually recovering an awful lot of flights, which meant that people didn't have to stay the night.
And talking of security, you'll recall that we spoke back in November when Gatwick Airport South Terminal was shut down, including the railway station, because somebody had been found with something which looked suspicious, and the bomb squad basically was sent a picture of the X-ray, and they said, we're coming over there now, close the place down. And so the whole of the South Terminal was closed down, but Gatwick went to enormous lengths to keep going. They said, right, we're going to get everybody funneled through the North Terminal, so if you're flying in, you were put on buses and taken there and go through, and that all worked. And they even phoned up the railways and said, Gatwick Airport Station's closed, do you mind stopping at nearby Hawley, because if you do, people will be able to basically walk from there. And that's what happened. And so it was a real kind of, oh my goodness, this has happened. It's terrible. What are we going to do to get the maximum number of people travelling? As opposed to Heathrow, which was sort of, oh, this isn't very good. We'll start again tomorrow, but good luck, everybody.
And let's not forget Thomas Walby famously decided to go home and go to bed in the midst of all of the drama. But here's what he had to say a little bit earlier when he was asked about the closure.
Why did we close the airport? When we cannot safely operate the airport, and when we cannot guarantee and have full visibility and transparency on the fact that we can operate the airport safely, then we cannot operate the airport. I think the only thing we could have done worse than that would have been to let passengers travel from an unsafe airport. That is not an option, and we cannot compromise on that. It became quite clear that we could not operate the airport safely quite early in this process, and that is why we closed the airport. If we had not done that, we would have had thousands of passengers stranded at the airport, high risk to personal injury, the risk of having literally tens of thousands of people stranded at the airport where we would have nowhere to put them, we could not process them.
I mean, the trouble is we've only really got his word for that, haven't we? Because we don't really know whether it was safe to operate.
Yes, and we've got actually, as well as the Transport Select Committee, we've got Ruth Kelly, former Transport Secretary, on behalf of Heathrow Airport, looking into basically, could we do things better? And then another inquiry taking place, ordered by the government, by your friend Ed Miliband, saying it's not going to happen again, and you've got to find out how we prevent it happening. So lots of inquiries, and lots will be found out. But ultimately, if the guy is saying we could not possibly, from a safety point of view, do anything else, then that's the end of his argument, and he can basically go back to bed.
Yes, I think that's right. I mean, that is the trouble, isn't it? And we once again take the thick end of the punishment, I'm afraid. Simon, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Simon Calder, travel correspondent at The Independent. Let's get a voice note from Joanne.
Morning, Mike. So Joanne from Norfolk here. Kevin Hollink-Rake actually highlighted something which is, I think, a huge issue in this country and highlights why we have the problems that we've got. When you have politicians that are far too busy considering the whims of their party donors, like the unions, etc., at the behest of anything they want, whenever they want, and then the people who are suffering exceptionally under this government are ignored.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's the way it feels, isn't it? And that's the way it looks, and that's the way it seems as well, because that's the way it is, I'm afraid. Got a lovely note here, though, from Barbara, who's in Costa Blanca. It's the first foreign sighting of a bumper sticker. She's put one on her very nice blue car. It's got a Spanish plate. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you what that is. But down in Costa Blanca, you can see it there. Lovely new car with a lovely bumper sticker, bottom right, the home of common sense. Morning Glory. What more could you want? Coming up, Kinsey Schofield's going to join us with the latest from Harry and the Herberts in Montecito.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory at 9:48. We're here for about another 10 minutes. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be along in a moment. I'm just about to speak to Kinsey Schofield, our favourite royal correspondent and commentator out there in Hollywood, California. Lisa in Birmingham just says this: don't forget your seagull story, Mike. Yeah, very quickly, because I have done this before. I was sitting on the beach at Lyme Regis once with my kids. We were having fish and chips. I think they were swimming in the shallows, and we were sitting there, and suddenly there was this big clunk across my head, and it felt like somebody had punched me. And I was sitting on the beach, and I thought, who the hell has done that? And I looked around, and there was a seagull. It had basically flown into the side of my head, right, and hit me quite hard. And I sort of looked around to see if it had taken the fish. Hadn't taken the fish. Sat back up, looked for my sunglasses. It had taken my sunglasses. So basically mugged by a seagull, because apparently they're quite attracted by shiny things, and they'd basically flown off, knocked the sunglasses off my head, and flown off with them. So that's my story about a seagull, but there we are. Kinsey Schofield, very good morning to you.
Hi, I'm over here trying to process the death of Val Kilmer in Los Angeles.
I know, isn't that a terrible story this morning? I mean, quite a shocking story. We knew he had not been very well for quite some time, and he was in the new Top Gun film, but he didn't really speak, I think, because he had a throat problem, didn't he?
Yeah, his son actually did the voiceover for him, but it looked amazing. But yeah, 65 years young, and I mean, along with Gene Hackman, one of the Hollywood greats. If you think about some of the best cinema coming out of the 1990s.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I always loved. I don't think he was ever in a bad movie, was he?
No, I mean, I can't stop thinking about Doc Holliday in Tombstone. That's my favorite. I loved him as Batman, too. Yeah, he was great in Top Gun. But yes, Jim Morrison, I mean, he was just a fantastic actor.
Yeah, he was. It's a very sad loss to the industry, that. Let's talk about the latest in the Harry row, because things are going from bad to worse for the boy. I call him the boy. I probably shouldn't call him the boy. He's a grown man. Sophie Chandulka really seems to have his number, doesn't she? Because it now turns out that the Montecito Massive, hilariously, are suggesting that she's playing the race card, which is pretty rich coming from them, isn't it?
Well, that's almost what her team says. Extraordinarily ironic, I think, was the exact quote that came from them. I mean, it's laughable, almost as laughable as Prince Harry's friend talking to the Daily Mail saying, I have H's permission to talk to you, and suggesting that Dr. Sophie is actually just jealous of Meghan Markle, where all of this stems from. Prince Harry, you have found yourself in a pickle. And on the day where Meghan Markle is finally releasing her jam, you know that there are jars of jam hitting the walls in Montecito today.
Right. I mean, it is incredible, isn't it? They're not going to be happy bunnies, are they? Because there's nowhere for him to go, really, because he hasn't come out and said anything officially. She hasn't come out and said anything officially. It seems as though they're now asking friends to say things, which they said they would never do. And this woman, who is still the chairman of the Soso-based charity, basically is running rings around them.
And that's what I would stress, Mike, that Prince Harry gave up his entire life for Meghan Markle, dedicated an entire book to vengeance, tearing into his DNA because his feelings were hurt over his wife, because his wife's feelings were hurt. Think about all of the family members and friends he's cut off due to his opinion that they didn't treat his wife well enough. Where is his wife when he needs support right now? Because a lot of the stuff that's being stirred up surrounds her. Right. Where is Meghan to stand up for her husband? I mean, I would be very disappointed if I were Prince Harry right now, thinking about all that I'd given up to support her and not feeling it in return.
Yeah, that's a very good point, which I hadn't really thought of. But the Sun's front page this morning has got the next sort of chapter in this saga, which is that basically she has now, Dr. Sophie Chandulka has now come off social media because she's been subjected to the most awful, ghastly, vile trolling from the Sussex squad. These are all the fans of Meghan who always jump all over anyone. I'm sure you've been a victim of it. I certainly have. Whenever anybody says anything that they don't like about Meghan, you know, you just get this ghastly kind of, you know, people wishing you dead and all sorts of other even worse things, right?
Yeah, they went after a Texas state representative that they assumed was my father, trying to dox the both of us. Spoiler alert, he wasn't my father.
Right.
But I know exactly what she's talking about. Unfortunately, they'll probably consider this a win. I would say this is only temporary. She's a very strong woman. She'll be back on social media before you know it. But having the platform that she has in this intense fight in the media right now, I wonder if people will start to point out the irony that Harry and Meghan campaign against online bullying, and their fans seem to be some of the most vile and aggressive online bullies that currently exist.
Exactly right. And not only that, but they've also railed on about bullying, online safety, all of the things that they are now accused of actually doing. Because let's not forget, you know, what she said in the past, Sophie Chandulkar, has not been denied.
Right. I mean, they're denying it through friends, saying that it's not true, but
they're not really, are they? They're kind of saying things like, well, you know, that's just her version of events, and they're not quite sort of outright saying it's not true.
Well, I think that they probably realize that this is a woman that's smart enough to have receipts. We've already found out that there are text messages that exist between Harry and Dr. Sophie that are apparently entitled and aggressive sounding. You know, how are you going to fix this? What are you going to do about this? So I do think that they realize she's probably smart enough to take notes and to keep receipts, and they don't want to deny too much, especially if this does go into any sort of courtroom where all of that would be on display for the public to digest.
Yeah, absolutely right. And a friend of the prince is quoted as saying that he is grief-stricken and in total shock. I mean, what tells you more about a man that's got nothing better to do than that statement?
Yeah, this is Prince Harry. The reason that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are so perpetually miserable is because they have too much time on their hands. The fact that they knew that people were making fun of Meghan on that stage during that weird trophy ceremony, that wasn't a mainstream issue. Harry and Meghan still read every single thing written about them. You know what I say when people say somebody's saying something bad about me online? It's none of my business. Well, that person's opinion of me is none of my business. And I think one of the reasons these two are so miserable, they have too much time and they spend too much time reading about themselves.
Yes, and that's always the hallmark of a narcissist, really, isn't it? You can't allow anybody to write anything without you having to find out exactly what it was said, and how you can then punish the person that writes something that you don't like.
Exactly, and I just don't think that's realistic in this day and age. Look at poor Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and what she dealt with during her cancer battle. There's no controlling the internet, so you just got to let it go and stay busy and stay above the fray.
A good question has just come in from Sue, saying, what's ever happened to Omid Scobie? Has he been discarded by any chance? Because, I mean, normally Omid Scobie would be doing the rounds of the TV stations, wouldn't he, telling everybody what actually was the truth, having been briefed.
Absolutely. I think we saw the implosion of that relationship when he falsely named King Charles and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, as the alleged royal racists in the Dutch version of Endgame. There has been really no communication at all since then.
And he's really disappeared from sight, which is no bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, he's out here selling a show about the royals, but it's a scripted drama, so we'll see how that goes. Honestly, probably more successful than Meghan's Netflix series, but we'll see how it goes for Omid.
Yeah, and we've been doing today, Kinsey, so I'm going to ask you the question. You heard my seagull story. There's a hawk which is on the loose in a little village north of Luton, which is attacking people. Have you ever had any encounters with wildlife that you want to share with us?
I mean, I have them all the time on the ocean. Nothing bad, though. I love wildlife. Next time you come to Arizona, we should go to this place where you can drive around and see bears. And I wish I could remember. Bearizona. It's called Bearizona.
Bearizona. Very good. I have seen bears. I saw bears in Yellowstone when I was there years ago. They actually put their paws up on the car and everything and looking in. Definitely don't feed them, though, whatever you do. Kinsey, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Enjoy the rest of the day. Kinsey Schofield there on Liberation Day, as some people are calling it. Well, that remains to be seen, of course, but people getting their knickers in an awful twist about it, and I don't really know why. Julie Hartley
Really? I mean, I don't know why anyone's calling it Liberation Day other than Donald Trump. I mean...
Well, they call it Liberation Day,
Well, but he does. But, I mean, in what way does making prices higher for consumers in the US Make it Liberation Day. Well, I mean, and such uncertainty. I mean, no one knows. We've got this announcement, 9 o'clock tonight, our time. Literally, no one knows. Not even people working in the White House.
So why worry?
Yeah, and there's him being, the big sort of, throwing stuff in and just the big disruptor.
Yeah, so why worry? Because
Rachel Reeves, it's people's jobs.
Well, Rachel Reeves has already killed the economy, so I mean, she can't kill it twice.
He's going to make it worse. He's going to make it worse. We shall see. What I'm asking today actually is what our response should be, because it's interesting. It's very different so far from Starmer. Sort of, please, a trade deal in return. The EU is saying we'll slap on reciprocal, but also Donald Trump thinks that VAT is a tariff. I mean, it's not. It's a sales tax, and every country's got one.
Yeah, they've even got them there. Sales tax in America. But the thing about Ursula von der Leyen thinks that she can reciprocate. She can't really, because they don't have a trade deal with America. No,
they do.
Hardly any Americans.
There are tariffs. No, there